The storm arrived like a living god over the northern empire of Vareth, swallowing mountains beneath black thunder and silver rain. At the edge of the forbidden forest known as Dreadmoor, King Vaelor Draven halted his warhorse the instant he heard the scream. Not fear, not surrender, defiance. It tore through the storm with such fury that even the ancient wolves hidden beneath the earth seemed to answer it. This is the story of two rulers who discovered that the crown always has a price, and sometimes the most dangerous thing a king can do is care. Stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop your city in the comments so I know where my pack is watching from. The torches guttered in the storm like dying stars. Vaelor Draven sat motionless atop his warhorse at the edge of Dreadmoor Forest, watching the ceremony unfold below. Rain hammered his shoulders. Lightning split the sky open every few seconds, illuminating the scene in bursts of white violence. 120 years he had ruled the Iron Dominion. 120 years of crushing rebellions, burying rivals, and keeping the savage noble houses from tearing each other apart. He had seen executions before. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. This one was different. The woman kneeling inside the burning ruins should have been begging, should have been screaming, should have been broken by now. The priests of the Council of Ash had stripped her to her undergarments, carved suppression marks into her bare shoulders, and chained her wrists with iron blessed by their so-called holy fire. Her dark silver hair clung to bruised skin. Blood traced her jawline where someone had struck her, yet her spine remained perfectly straight. Princess Selene Voss, last heir of a bloodline believed extinct. Vaelor had heard the stories. Everyone had. The cursed princess, the monster child, the girl who made storms bend toward her emotions and ancient wards shatter when she walked too close. Noble families whispered about her in corridors. Mothers used her name to frighten children into obedience. The Council of Ash had been hunting her bloodline for 3 centuries, systematically erasing every trace of what they called corrupted power. And now they had her. The High Chancellor stood before the crowd, his white robes billowing in the wind. His voice carried across the clearing despite the storm, amplified by some trick of their ancient magic. "Behold the last corruption of the sovereign blood," he declared. "Behold the creature who would destroy our civilization. The council has judged her. The gods have found her wanting. Tonight, we offer her to the Hallowing, that the forest may cleanse what we cannot." The crowd murmured approval. Nobles, merchants, soldiers, all of them watching with that particular hunger humans develop when they witness someone more powerful than themselves brought low. Selene lifted her head. Her silver eyes swept across the gathered masses with such cold contempt that several people actually stepped back. Then she laughed. Cold, bitter, unbroken. "You fear me so much," she said, her voice cutting through the storm like a blade, "that you built a religion around my death." The entire court fell silent. The High Chancellor's face darkened. "You dare mock the judgment of—" "I dare," Selene interrupted. She tried to stand, but the chains jerked her back down. Blood welled where the iron cut into her wrists. She did not flinch. "You hunted my family for generations. You murdered my grandmother in her sleep. You burned my mother alive when I was 6 years old. You spent my entire childhood carving these marks into my skin to suppress what terrifies you. And now you stand there in your pretty robes talking about judgment?" Her laugh returned, sharper this time. Meaner. "This is not judgment. This is extermination. At least have the spine to call it what it is." Someone in the crowd threw a stone. It struck her shoulder. She did not look away from the High Chancellor. Vaelor felt something shift in his chest. Something dangerous. Something he had not felt in decades. Curiosity. Because kings who become curious are capable of destroying entire empires. He leaned forward slightly in his saddle, studying her more closely. The suppression marks carved into her flesh were not random. They followed patterns he recognized from ancient texts locked away in the royal archives. Patterns designed to contain something immense, something the council feared more than armies or sieges or civil war. Raw power. The kind that could not be controlled through politics or arranged marriages or carefully worded treaties. The kind that had to be buried alive. The High Chancellor raised his hands. The torches flared brighter. The crowd pressed closer to the edge of the ruins, eager to witness the final moment. "The Halloween begins," he announced. The masked priest stepped forward, chanting in a language so old even Vaelor did not recognize all the words. The runes beneath Selene ignited, burning hotter, brighter. She gasped as the chains yanked her flat against the ground. The suppression marks on her skin began to glow red, then white, pulsing in rhythm with the chant. This was the ritual, the hollowing. They would burn away her power first, strip her of everything that made her dangerous. Then they would release her into Dreadmore Forest, where the creatures that lived in the dark places between trees would tear her apart. A ceremonial execution disguised as divine judgment. Selene screamed, not in surrender, in rage. The sound of it punched through Vaelor's restraint like a fist through parchment. Before he consciously decided to move, his warhorse was already descending the hill. His captain, a scarred veteran named Thyron, appeared beside him instantly. "My king, the sacred neutrality pact?" "I know what I am violating," Vaelor said quietly. "This could mean war with the council." "Yes." "For a woman you do not know." Vaelor did not answer. Could not answer. Because he did not understand it himself. He only knew that watching Selene Voss kneel inside those burning runes while the Empire celebrated her destruction made something primal wake up inside him, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. Recognition. Ancient blood recognizing ancient blood. He rode straight through the crowd. People scattered. Nobles shouted protests. The High Chancellor turned, his face going pale when he saw the king approaching. "Your Majesty," he began, "the ritual has begun. You cannot interfere with—" Vaelor drew his sword. The sound of steel leaving the scabbard cut through every other noise. The chanting stopped. The priests froze. The entire clearing went silent, except for the storm. "Release her," Vaelor said. The High Chancellor stared at him. "You would violate 300 years of neutrality for this creature?" "I would violate considerably more than that. Release her. Now." "My king, she is corrupted. Dangerous. The sovereign blood cannot be allowed to—" "I am aware of what she is," Vaelor interrupted. His voice was soft, lethal. "I am also aware that you have been systematically murdering anyone born with that power for centuries. And I'm beginning to wonder why." The crowd shifted uneasily. Soldiers glanced at each other. Even Thyron looked uncertain. The High Chancellor recovered quickly. He always did. 3 centuries of political survival had made him very good at reading power dynamics. "Of course, Your Majesty," he said smoothly. "If you wish to take responsibility for the creature, that is your right as sovereign. But know this." He leaned closer, lowering his voice so only Vaelor could hear. "The moment you cross this line, you become her. Monster by association. Every noble house will turn against you. Every alliance will crumble. You will lose everything you spent a century building." Vaelor met his eyes. "Then I will lose it." He dismounted and walked straight into the burning runes. The heat hit him like a physical wall. The ancient magic fought his presence, trying to repel him. It did not matter. He had survived worse. He knelt beside Selene and broke the chains with his bare hands. The blessed iron should have burned him. It did. He ignored it. Selene stared at him, her silver eyes wide with shock and pain, and something else. Something raw. Hope. Fragile, desperate, dangerous. "Why?" she whispered. Vaelor lifted her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing. They had starved her, tortured her, carved her open, and still she had kept her spine straight. "Because," he said quietly, "I have spent 120 years preserving a peace built on lies. And I am tired of it." He carried her out of the runes. The priests scattered. The High Chancellor opened his mouth to protest, but Thyron was already there, his hand on his sword hilt, his expression making it very clear what would happen if anyone interfered. The crowd parted. Vaelor placed Selene on his warhorse and climbed up behind her. She slumped against him, her body finally surrendering to the trauma now that survival was no longer required. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast, erratic, fading. She was dying. The suppression ritual had gone too far. They had burned too much of her away. "Hold on," he murmured against her hair. "Why?" she asked again, her voice barely audible. "You do not know me. You do not owe me anything." Vaelor looked down at her, at the silver hair matted with blood, at the marks carved into her skin by people who called themselves holy, at the defiance still burning in her eyes, despite everything they had done to extinguish it. No, he agreed, but I know what they did to you, and I know why. Her eyes fluttered closed. Tell me, she breathed. Because you are not the monster, princess. They are. And they have been controlling this empire through fear for far too long. She went limp in his arms. Vaelor turned his horse toward the north, toward the hidden fortress carved into the cliffs where kings went when they needed to disappear. Behind him, the High Chancellor was already shouting orders. Soldiers were mobilizing. The Council of Ash was preparing for war. Let them come. Vaelor Draven had spent 120 years being the king they needed him to be. Brutal, efficient, controlled. Tonight, for the first time in decades, he was going to be something far more dangerous. Honest. Pican. The ride north took 3 days. Selene drifted in and out of consciousness the entire time. Fever consumed her body. The suppression marks had burned too deep, poisoning her blood. Vaelor pushed his warhorse harder than he should have, stopping only when absolutely necessary. Thyron and a dozen of his most trusted guards rode with them, silent and watchful. No one asked questions. That was how Vaelor had built loyalty. Not through speeches or promises, through understanding. His soldiers knew when to speak and when to simply follow. On the second night, Selene woke screaming. They had stopped in a hollow between two hills, hidden from the road. Vaelor had been checking her wounds when her eyes snapped open, wide and wild and terrified. She thrashed against him with surprising strength for someone half dead. "Get away from me," she gasped. "Do not touch me. I will kill you. I will—" "Easy." Vaelor caught her wrists carefully, mindful of the raw flesh beneath the broken chains. "You are safe." "Safe." She laughed, the sound jagged and broken. "No one is safe near me. That is what they told me. That is what they carved into my skin every day for 15 years. Monster, corruption, curse. I will destroy everything I touch." And yet here I am, still breathing. She stared at him. Really looked at him for the first time since the ritual. Rain dripped from her hair. Her face was gaunt with starvation and trauma. But her eyes were still burning with something the council had never managed to extinguish. Fight. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded. "I told you." "No. Tell me the real reason. Men like you do not risk empires for strangers. What do you want from me?" Vaelor considered lying. He was good at it. 120 years of ruling required constant deception. But looking at Selene, at the raw suspicion in her expression, he realized lies would not work on her. She had spent her entire life being manipulated by people who smiled while carving her open. "I do not know yet," he admitted. That surprised her. Her expression shifted, suspicion giving way to confusion. "You do not know?" "No. But when I saw you kneeling inside those runes, when I heard you call out their hypocrisy in front of the entire empire, something in me recognized something in you, and I have learned to trust that instinct. It has kept me alive longer than most kings survive." Selene studied his face for a long moment. Then, slowly, the tension drained from her body. She slumped back against the bedroll, exhaustion winning over fear. "They will come for you," she whispered. "The council. The noble houses, everyone. They will destroy you for this." "Let them try." "You do not understand. I am not worth this. I am not worth anything. They were right. I am—" "Do not," Vaelor interrupted, his voice sharp. "Do not repeat their poison." She flinched. For a moment she looked impossibly young. Not a princess, not a monster, just a woman who had spent her entire life being told she deserved the cruelty inflicted upon her. "Then what am I?" she asked quietly. Vaelor leaned back, considering the question. Rain pattered against the canvas shelter Thyron had erected. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Selene's eyes flicked toward the sound instinctively, and Vaelor noticed something strange. The howling stopped, as if the wolf had heard something in return. "I do not know what you are yet," he said finally, "but I know what you are not. You are not cursed. You are not a monster. You are dangerous. There is a difference." "How?" "Monsters destroy without reason. Dangerous people destroy with purpose, and the Council of Ash has been very careful to make certain no one understands the difference." Selene closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her cheek, cutting through the grime. "I am so tired," she breathed. I know. For 15 years they told me I was poison, that everyone I cared about would suffer because of me. And they were right. My mother burned. My grandmother murdered. My fiancé betrayed me to save himself. My best friend delivered evidence against me to the council. Everyone who ever... Her voice broke. Vaelor did something he had not done in decades. He reached out and took her hand. Her silver eyes snapped open, startled. She stared at their joined hands as if she could not quite process what she was seeing. You survived, Vaelor said quietly. That is not weakness. That is power they could not take from you, no matter how hard they tried. Survival is not power. It is just postponed death. Then postpone it a little longer, at least until we reach the fortress. Then you can decide whether living is worth the effort. Selene huffed a sound that might have been a laugh if it had not been so bitter. You do not make it sound very appealing. Good. I am not trying to. I am simply offering you a choice. The first real choice you have probably had in years. She was quiet for a long time. Then, so softly he almost missed it. Thank you. Vaelor squeezed her hand once, then released it. Sleep. We ride at dawn. She nodded and closed her eyes. Within moments, her breathing evened out. But Vaelor noticed her hand remained where he had left it, fingers slightly curled as if still holding on to something, or someone. Thyron appeared at the edge of the shelter, his expression carefully neutral. The scouts report council soldiers 2 days behind us, moving fast. How many? At least 200, maybe more. Vaelor nodded. When we reach the fortress, send riders to the northern clans. Tell them I am invoking the old pacts. I want every sworn sword within 3 days' ride assembled at the gates. That will mean war, my king. Yes. Thyron hesitated. May I speak freely? You always do. She is one woman, and the council has 3 centuries of political power behind them. Is she truly worth starting a civil war? Vaelor looked down at Selene, at the suppression marks carved into her skin, at the defiance that even torture had not managed to break. Ask me again in a week, he said, when we discover what she becomes once those marks are removed. Thyron's eyes widened. You intend to free her power? I intend to give her the choice. The council has spent 300 years deciding what people are allowed to become. I am curious what happens when someone finally decides for themselves. That could be catastrophic. Yes, or it could change everything. Vaelor smiled, cold and sharp. Either way, it will be interesting. Thyron shook his head but did not argue further. He knew better. Once Vaelor made a decision, mountains moved or mountains burned. There was no middle ground. The captain withdrew into the rain. Vaelor sat watch over Selene through the night, listening to the wolves howl in the distance. Each time they called out, she stirred slightly in her sleep. And each time the howling changed, softened, as if the ancient predators of Dreadmoor Forest recognized something in her they had not seen in centuries. Something older than the council, older than the Empire itself. As dawn broke gray and cold over the northern hills, Vaelor realized he had crossed a line he could never uncross. Not when he violated the Neutrality Pact, not when he carried her out of the burning ruins, but right now, this moment. Because somewhere between the ritual and the ride north, between her defiance and her vulnerability, he had stopped seeing Selene Voss as a problem to solve or a threat to contain. He had started seeing her as something far more dangerous. Possibility. And kings who discover possibility in broken things become willing to burn nations to protect what they find. The fortress appeared on the 3rd day. Carved directly into the northern cliffs, it was invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Ancient kings had built it during the First Wars, back when the Empire was still young and survival required secrets. Vaelor had used it only a handful of times over his long reign, usually to imprison enemies too dangerous to execute, once to hide during a nearly successful assassination attempt. Now he brought a woman the entire Empire wanted dead. The gates opened at his approach. His soldiers had ridden ahead with orders. Inside, physicians waited, food, medicine, everything required to keep someone alive who probably should have died days ago. Vaelor carried Selene inside personally. She was barely conscious. The fever had worsened despite everything they had done. Her skin burned beneath his hands. The suppression marks glowed faintly, pulsing with infection and poison. The head physician, an elderly woman named Mira, took one look and went pale. "My king, these marks? I know what they are. They are killing her. The poison has spread through her entire system. We need to remove them immediately, or—" "Do it," Mira hesitated. "Your Majesty, if we break the suppression seals without proper preparation, her power will erupt uncontrolled. This entire fortress could—" "I said do it." The physician bowed and hurried to prepare. Vaelor laid Selene on the stone table in the center of the room. Candles flickered. Shadows danced across the ancient walls. Outside, storm clouds gathered, as if drawn by her presence. Selene's eyes cracked open. She looked around, confused and disoriented. "Where?" "Safe," Vaelor said. "For now." "The marks!" She gasped as pain lanced through her. "They are burning. I can feel them spreading, killing me from the inside." "I know. We're going to remove them." Fear flashed across her face. Real fear. The first he had seen from her. "No, you cannot. If you break the seals, I will lose control. I will destroy everything. I cannot—" Vaelor leaned down, catching her face between his hands, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You have spent 15 years being told you are too dangerous to exist, that your power is a curse that needs to be contained. But I have seen corrupted power. I have fought it, killed it, burned it from the earth. And you?" He brushed his thumb across her cheek, wiping away a tear she did not seem to realize she had shed. "You are not corrupted. You are suppressed. There is a difference." "How can you know that?" "Because I have been alive for 120 years, and in all that time, the only people the Council has ever called monsters are the ones powerful enough to threaten their control." Mira returned with assistants carrying tools and herbs and ancient texts pulled from the fortress archives. She looked at Vaelor uncertainly. "Are you certain, my king?" He did not take his eyes off Selene. "Do it." The procedure took hours. They had to cut carefully around each suppression mark, breaking the seals one at a time to prevent catastrophic backlash. Selene screamed through most of it, the kind of screaming that comes from pain so deep it lives in the bones. Vaelor held her down personally, his hands on her shoulders, his weight keeping her from thrashing off the table. "I am sorry," he murmured against her ear during a brief pause. "I am so sorry." "Do not apologize," she gasped. "Just do not let go." "Never." The word came out before he could stop it. Absolute, binding, the kind of promise kings should never make. Selene heard it anyway. Her silver eyes locked onto his, wide with shock and something else. Trust, fragile, terrifying, irreversible. Then Mira cut into the final seal. Power exploded from Selene's body like a dam breaking. The entire fortress shook. Candles blew out. The stone table cracked down the center. Wind howled through the room despite the closed doors and windows. Silver light erupted from Selene's skin, so bright Vaelor had to look away. The physicians staggered back, shielding their eyes. Even Thyron, who had fought beside Vaelor in 100 battles, stepped back toward the door. But Vaelor did not move. He kept his hands on Selene's shoulders as her power tore free from 15 years of suppression. As it flooded the room like a living thing, searching for threats, searching for enemies, searching for anything that had hurt her, it found him. The power slammed into Vaelor with physical force, probing, testing, ready to destroy. Then it hesitated. Because underneath the pain and rage and centuries of persecution, Selene's power recognized something. Protection. Not chains. Not control. Someone standing between her and the world with no intention of moving. The silver light coiled around Vaelor like smoke, like recognition, like something ancient finally finding what it had been searching for. Then slowly, it retreated back into Selene's body. The wind died. The shaking stopped. The room fell silent except for harsh breathing. Selene lay on the cracked table, her chest heaving, her skin covered in silver patterns where the suppression marks had been. Not scars. Something else. Something that looked almost like constellations. Her eyes opened. They glowed. Faintly. Beautifully. Impossibly. "What?" Her voice was different, deeper, resonant. "What did you do to me?" "Nothing," Vaelor said. His voice was steady despite the adrenaline singing through his veins. "We We simply stopped doing things to you. This? He gestured at the silver patterns. This is what you were always meant to be. Selene stared at her hands, at the power humming beneath her skin, at the freedom she had never been allowed to experience. Then she started to cry. Not delicate tears, sobbing, the kind that comes from releasing decades of pain all at once. Vaelor pulled her against him without thinking. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in a world gone liquid. Her power pulsed against his chest, no longer violent but lost, confused, free. I do not know what I am, she sobbed into his shoulder. Then we will figure it out together. They will come for us. Yes. They will destroy you. They will try. She pulled back enough to look at him. Her silver eyes were still glowing faintly, tears tracking through the grime on her face. Why? She demanded for the third time. Why would you risk everything for me? Vaelor cupped her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Because I have spent 120 years being the king this empire needed. Brutal, controlled, empty. And then I heard you scream inside those runes. Not in surrender, in defiance. And something in me that I thought had died a very long time ago woke up and said, That is what power looks like when it refuses to break, and I will be damned if I let them extinguish it. Selene's breath caught. That is not an answer. No, Vaelor agreed, but it is the only truth I have right now. They stared at each other. Outside, thunder rolled across the northern cliffs. The storm was building, drawn by her presence, answering her power like a call it had been waiting centuries to hear. Then Thyron appeared in the doorway. His face was grim. My king, we have a problem. The council? No, worse. Thyron stepped aside. A woman walked into the room. She was beautiful in that calculated way noble ladies perfect, auburn hair pinned elegantly, emerald dress pristine despite the journey, face arranged in an expression of careful concern. Selene went rigid. Elira, she breathed. Lady Elira of House Crestfall, Selene's childhood friend, her closest companion, the woman who had stood beside her through years of persecution and whispered promises that they would survive together, the woman who had delivered evidence against her to the council. Selene, Elira said, her voice breaking beautifully. Thank the gods you are alive. I was so worried. I thought, Get out, Selene interrupted. Her voice was cold, lethal. Elira's eyes widened, tears welled, perfect, calculated. Please, you have to let me explain. They forced me. The council threatened my family. I had no choice. I tried to protect you. I tried. Liar? The word rang through the room like a death knell. Selene stood from the table, unsteady, weak, but silver fire beginning to pulse beneath her skin. You were not forced. You volunteered. I heard you, through the walls of my cell, laughing with the High Chancellor about how easy it was, how desperate I had been for someone to trust, how pathetic. That is not true, Elira gasped. Selene, please. I came to warn you. The council is sending assassins tonight. They're going to attack the fortress and... She stopped, because Selene had started laughing. The sound was wrong, all edges and broken glass. Warn me. Selene took a step closer. You came here to warn me. Yes, I know you have no reason to trust me, but you are right, I do not, because you are not here to warn me. You are here to finish what the council started. That is why you arrived before the assassins, to open the gates from inside. Elira's perfect mask cracked, just for a second, but it was enough. Vaelor's sword was at her throat before she could move. Tell me why I should not execute you where you stand, he said quietly. Elira went very still. Her eyes flicked to Selene. Because she will never forgive you if you do. Will you, Selene? You are too soft, too kind. That is why they were always going to win. No, Selene said softly. I was soft. I was kind. But you and the council carved that out of me piece by piece. And what you left behind? The silver fire in her eyes burned brighter. What you left behind is something considerably less forgiving. The temperature in the room dropped. Elira's breath fogged in the sudden cold. Outside, wolves began to howl. Not in the distance, at the fortress gates. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Answering something they felt in their bones. Alira's face went pale. "What are you?" she whispered. Selene smiled, cold, beautiful, terrifying. "You spent 15 years helping them suppress me. Now you get to find out what happens when someone like me stops apologizing for surviving." She raised her hand. Silver light exploded from her palm. Alira screamed, and the fortress gates shattered inward as shadow soldiers poured through the breach. The ambush had begun. Shadow soldiers poured through the shattered gates like smoke given form. Vaelor moved on instinct. His sword was already in motion before conscious thought caught up, deflecting the first blade aimed at Selene's throat. Steel screamed against steel. The assassin stumbled back and Vaelor drove his blade through the man's chest in one fluid motion. No hesitation, no mercy. The body hit the floor before the others even registered what had happened. Thyron was already shouting orders. The fortress garrison mobilized with practiced efficiency. Soldiers flooded the courtyard. Archers appeared on the ramparts. But Vaelor could see the numbers immediately. 50 defenders against at least 200 attackers. Maybe more still outside the walls. The council had not come to arrest them. They had come to erase them. Alira backed toward the doorway, her perfect mask finally crumbling into something raw and desperate. Selene's silver fire tracked her movement, illuminating the betrayer in cold light. "I gave them the gate codes," Alira said, her voice shaking. "I gave them everything, the layout, the guard rotations, your exact location. They promised me safety. They promised my family. They promised you power," Selene interrupted. Her voice was unnaturally calm. "That is what you actually wanted. Not safety. Power. The kind I was born with and you could never have." Alira's face twisted. "You do not understand what it is like. Being ordinary, standing next to someone like you every day, watching everyone bow. Watching them fear you and desire you and hate you all at once. Do you know what that does to someone? Do you have any idea?" "Bitkichi, I know exactly what it does," Selene said softly. "It makes you dangerous, but not in the way you think." Silver light exploded from her palm. Alira screamed and threw herself sideways. The blast missed her by inches, shattering the stone doorframe instead. Chunks of rock rained down. Alira scrambled through the opening and disappeared into the corridor beyond. Vaelor started after her, but Selene caught his arm. "Let her go. She will lead them directly to us. Yes, but killing her now gives her an ending she does not deserve. Let her live. Let her spend the rest of her miserable life knowing she betrayed the only person who ever truly cared about her for nothing. Let her watch us survive. That will destroy her far more completely than any blade." Vaelor studied her face, the cold fury burning there, the calculated cruelty. This was not the broken woman he had carried from the ritual 3 days ago. This was something else emerging, something the council had been right to fear. Outside, battle erupted in full. The courtyard became a killing ground. Council soldiers fought with religious fervor, believing they were purging corruption from the world. Vaelor's garrison fought with the desperation of men who knew they were vastly outnumbered. Steel rang against steel. Men screamed. Blood painted the ancient stones. Vaelor moved through the chaos like death itself. 120 years of warfare had made him something beyond ordinary soldiers. He did not think, did not plan, just reacted. His sword found throats, hearts, the gaps in armor where a blade could slip through and end a life in seconds. Around him, his enemies fell, but more kept coming. They flooded through the broken gates in waves. Professional. Coordinated. This was not a hasty assault. This was a planned extermination. Thyron appeared beside him, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. "We cannot hold them, my king. There are too many. We need to evacuate you and the princess through the eastern passage before—" "No! Your Majesty, you will die here if—" "I said no!" Vaelor drove his blade through an attacker's throat without looking away from his captain. "We hold this position. If I run now, the council wins. They will hunt us forever. This ends tonight." "How? We are outnumbered 4-1. Vaelor glanced back toward the fortress interior, toward Selene standing in the doorway, silver fire pulsing beneath her skin like a caged storm. "We changed the numbers," he said. Understanding dawned on Thyron's face, followed immediately by horror. "My king, she is barely conscious. Her power just broke free. She has no control. If you unleash her in the middle of a battle, then the battle ends quickly, one way or another. Vaelor cut down 2 more soldiers and strode toward Selene. She watched him approach, her silver eyes tracking his movement with predatory focus. Around her, the air shimmered with barely contained energy. The temperature fluctuated wildly, hot, then cold, then hot again. Reality itself seemed uncertain near her, because that is what sovereign blood did when it finally broke free from suppression. It rewrote the rules. Vaelor stopped in front of her. Blood dripped from his sword. His breathing was controlled despite the exertion. Around them, his soldiers were dying, screaming, fighting impossible odds. "I need you to trust me," he said. Selene's expression was unreadable. "Trust is what got me tortured for 15 years. "I know, but I am not them, and right now you have a choice. You can stay here and watch everyone who protected you die, or you can fight." "I do not know how to control this." She held up her hands. Silver light danced between her fingers. "I do not even know what this is." "Then do not control it. Release it. Let it do what it was designed to do." "And what is that?" Vaelor smiled, cold, brutal, honest. "Survive." Selene stared at him. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The battle raged around them. Men died. Blood flowed. The council's assassins pushed deeper into the fortress. Then Selene's expression shifted, from uncertainty to something far more dangerous: acceptance. She walked past Vaelor into the courtyard. Soldiers from both sides immediately turned toward her. Some lunged forward to attack. Others froze, instincts screaming warnings they did not fully understand. Selene stopped in the center of the killing ground, raised her arms, and released everything the council had spent 15 years burying. Power erupted from her body like a star going nova. Silver fire consumed the courtyard. The fortress walls cracked. The ground itself split apart in jagged lines radiating from where she stood. Wind howled with such force that men were thrown backward, slamming into stone hard enough to break bones. The council's soldiers scattered in terror. But that was not what made Vaelor's breath catch in his throat. It was what came next. From the forest beyond the walls, wolves answered her call. Not ordinary wolves. Ancient ones. The kind that lived in the deep places where human civilization had never reached. Massive, feral, eyes glowing with intelligence that predated language. They poured over the walls like a living avalanche. The council's soldiers broke completely. Discipline shattered. Men threw down their weapons and ran. Others screamed prayers to gods who were not listening. A few tried to fight, but the wolves tore through them with brutal efficiency. Selene stood in the center of chaos, arms outstretched, silver fire spiraling around her like a living crown. She was not controlling the wolves. She was their queen, and they had been waiting 300 years for her to claim the title. Vaelor watched in stunned silence as the battle ended in less than 5 minutes. The survivors fled into the forest, abandoning weapons and armor in their desperation to escape. The wolves pursued but did not kill. They herded, drove the invaders away from their queen's territory. Then, as quickly as it had erupted, Selene's power retreated. The silver fire dimmed. The wind died. The wolves melted back into the forest shadows, their glowing eyes watching, waiting. Selene collapsed. Vaelor caught her before she hit the ground. She was unconscious, her skin cold despite the power that had just torn through her. He carried her back inside, his soldiers parting silently to let him pass. No one spoke, because they had all just witnessed something that should not exist, a sovereign alpha in full awakening. The Empire had not seen one in 3 centuries. Now everyone would know why the Council had worked so hard to make certain they never saw another. Selene slept for 2 days. Vaelor stayed beside her the entire time. Mira checked on her regularly, monitoring her vitals, adjusting medications. But there was nothing physically wrong with her. Her body was simply recovering from channeling more power than any human vessel should be able to contain. On the morning of the 3rd day, her eyes opened. Silver, glowing faintly even in daylight. "How many did I kill?" she asked immediately. Vaelor had been expecting the question. 17, all of them attacking my soldiers, the rest fled. 17 men are dead because I lost control. 17 assassins are dead because you saved 50 defenders. There is a difference. Selene sat up slowly, her expression haunted. I remember it, all of it. The power, the wolves, The feeling of their minds touching mine, it was... She stopped, searching for words that did not exist. Intoxicating? Vaelor suggested quietly. Her eyes snapped to his. Yes. And that terrifies me. Because the council was right about one thing. Power like this does corrupt. I felt it. The urge to keep going, to destroy everything that had ever hurt me. If I had not exhausted myself. But you did. That is what control actually looks like. Not suppression, not denial, knowing when to stop. Is that what you tell yourself? Selene's voice had an edge now. You who have ruled for 120 years? You who burned an army alive to end a civil war? Tell me, King Vaelor Draven, what does control look like when you are the most powerful person in the Empire? Vaelor leaned back in his chair, considered lying, decided against it. Loneliness, he said finally. That surprised her. Her expression softened slightly. Loneliness? Yes. Because when you are powerful enough that no one can challenge you, no one can truly know you either. They fear you, respect you, obey you, but they can never see you as anything other than the force that will destroy them if they step wrong. So you exist in a permanent state of isolation, surrounded by people, utterly alone. Selene was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Is that why you took me from the ritual? Because you recognize that isolation in me? Partly, but also because I am tired of being alone. And when I saw you kneeling in those ruins, defiant even while they were killing you, I thought perhaps... He stopped. What? I thought perhaps there was someone in this empire strong enough that I could finally stop pretending. Selene's breath caught. Pretending what? That I enjoy being feared more than known. The admission hung in the air between them. Raw, dangerous, honest. Outside, Thyron's voice cut through the moment, calling for the king, urgent, angry. Vaelor stood. We will finish this conversation later. Wait. Selene caught his wrist. Her hand was warm despite her earlier coldness. Thank you for not treating me like a weapon, for giving me a choice. Vaelor looked down at where her fingers circled his wrist. Such a small touch. It should not have meant anything, but after 120 years of carefully maintained distance, it felt revolutionary. You are not a weapon, princess. You are considerably more dangerous than that. What am I then? He met her eyes. Silver meeting violet. Free. For the first time in your life. And there is nothing more terrifying to people like the council than someone powerful who no longer accepts their chains. He left before she could respond. In the courtyard, Thyron was interrogating a prisoner, one of the council soldiers who had not fled fast enough. The man was bleeding from a dozen wounds, tied to a post, his face pale with terror and blood loss. Tell him, Thyron demanded. Tell the king what you told me. The soldier swallowed. His eyes found Vaelor. The High Chancellor has declared you a traitor, you and the princess both. He has convinced the noble houses that you are corrupted, that she has enchanted you, that together you will destroy the empire. He is calling for a united front. Every house, every banner, 30,000 soldiers marching north to cleanse the corruption. Vaelor felt something cold settle in his chest. Not fear, calculation. 30,000. You are certain? Yes, your majesty. Lord Cassian Vael leads the vanguard. Lady Alira rides with them. They are 3 days away, maybe less. They will arrive with siege weapons, mages, holy warriors blessed by the council. They intend to level this fortress and execute everyone inside. Including the king? The soldier hesitated, then nodded. Especially the king. The High Chancellor says you are the greater corruption, that she is merely a tool you are using to seize absolute power, that if they kill you first, she can still be saved, rehabilitated, returned to proper control. Vaelor laughed. The sound was so unexpected that Thyron actually flinched. They think she can be controlled, Vaelor said, after everything they have seen, after she summoned ancient wolves and shattered their assault in minutes. They still believe she is the tool, and I am the master? They believe what the High Chancellor tells them to believe, the soldier said. That is how the council has maintained power for 3 centuries, through narrative, through controlling what people think they understand about power. Vaelor nodded slowly. The soldier was right. Humans rarely saw reality clearly. They saw stories, and whoever controlled the story controlled everything. Thyron, send riders to every sworn banner in the north. Call in every debt, every favor, every promise made over the last century. I want 5,000 soldiers here in 3 days. That still leaves us outnumbered 6-1, my king. I know, but we are not going to fight them with soldiers. Then what? Vaelor looked back toward the fortress, toward the room where Selene was recovering, toward the woman who had just proven she could rewrite the rules of warfare with a thought. We are going to give the Empire exactly what the Council fears most: a sovereign alpha who remembers what she is, and a king who has finally stopped apologizing for what he is willing to do to protect her. Understanding dawned on Thyron's face, followed immediately by horror. You are going to bond with her, fully. The ancient ritual. Yes. That bond cannot be broken. Once completed, you will be linked. What she feels, you feel. Her power becomes yours. Your will becomes hers. It is permanent, absolute. And if the council is right, if she is corrupted, then I will be corrupted alongside her. But I do not believe she is. I believe she is what the first kings were before politics and fear turned leadership into performance. Raw, honest, powerful enough to change everything. And if you are wrong, Vaelor smiled, cold, final. Then the Empire gets the monster it created. Either way, the Council loses. Thyron was quiet for a long moment, then he bowed. I will prepare the ritual chamber, my king. Wait. Vaelor called him back. You have served me for 70 years, fought beside me, bled for me. If you want to leave, now is the time. I will not hold it against you, but after tonight, anyone who stands with me stands against the entire Empire. There will be no going back. Thyron met his eyes. My king, I followed you when you were brutal, when you were cold, when you burned men alive to preserve peace. But this? A slight smile. This is the first time I have seen you fight for something instead of against everything. I am not leaving now. Relief flickered through Vaelor's chest. He clasped Thyron's shoulder once. Then prepare the chamber and send someone to tell the princess we need to talk. Thyron left. Vaelor stood alone in the courtyard, looking up at the darkening sky. Storm clouds gathered again, drawn by Selene's presence. By power, the earth itself remembered. In 3 days, 30,000 soldiers would arrive at these gates, demanding his head and Selene's surrender. In 3 days, he would either be dead or irrevocably changed. But standing there, blood still staining his hands, his empire crumbling around him, Vaelor felt something he had not experienced in decades. Certainty. Because rulers spend their entire lives making calculated decisions, weighing options, choosing the path that preserves power. But sometimes, very rarely, a king discovers something worth more than power. Purpose. And the moment that happens, empires tremble. Because a king with nothing to lose is predictable. But a king with something to protect is capable of rewriting history. Sak. The ritual chamber existed deep beneath the fortress. Carved from living rock during the First Wars, it had not been used in 200 years. Ancient symbols covered the walls. Protective wards. Binding runes. The kind of magic that predated the Council's sanitized version of power. Vaelor descended the stone stairs slowly. Torches flickered in wall sconces, casting dancing shadows. At the bottom, Selene waited. She had changed into simple clothes. Dark leather, practical. Her silver hair was pulled back, revealing the constellation patterns where the suppression marks had been. In the torchlight, they seemed to pulse faintly with their own luminescence. She looked up as he approached. Thyron told me what you are planning, the bonding ritual. Yes. He also told me what it means, that we will be permanently linked, that there is no reversal, no escape, that if I am truly corrupted, I will destroy you alongside myself. Yes, Selene's expression was unreadable. Why would you risk that? Vaelor stopped in front of her, close enough to see the silver flecks in her eyes, close enough to feel the power humming beneath her skin like electricity. Because I have spent 120 years being careful, being controlled, being the king everyone needed me to be. And it has left me with an empire I do not recognize anymore. Built on fear, maintained through suppression, the council killing anyone who threatens their version of order. He paused. You asked me earlier why I took you from the ritual, the real reason? Yes. Because when I saw you kneeling in those ruins, still defiant after everything they did to break you, I realized something. The Empire is not dying because of monsters. It is dying because we have spent 3 centuries calling our strongest people monsters and killing them before they can change anything. Selene's breath caught. You think I can change things? I think you already have. In 3 days, you shattered an assault that should have killed everyone in this fortress. You summoned creatures that have not answered a human call in 300 years. You proved that sovereign blood is not corruption. It is evolution. And the Council will do anything to prevent the Empire from understanding that truth. So you bond with me to what? Make a political statement? No. Vaelor's voice dropped, became something more honest, more dangerous. I bond with you because I am tired of being alone. Because I want to know what it feels like to stand beside someone powerful enough that I do not have to pretend. And because... He stopped. Because what? Because the moment I carried you out of those ruins, something in me recognized something in you. Ancient blood calling to ancient blood. And I am done fighting that instinct. Selene stared at him. Her silver eyes searched his face, looking for lies, for manipulation, for the political calculation she had learned to expect from everyone. She found none. If we do this, she said slowly, there is no going back. You understand that? The Council will never stop hunting us. The noble houses will turn against you. Everything you built over the last century will burn. Yes. And you are willing to lose all of that? For someone you barely know? Vaelor smiled. Not the cold political smile he usually wore. Something real. Princess, I have spent 120 years building an empire on fear and careful control, and it has given me nothing but isolation. So yes, I am willing to burn it all down to find out what we become when we stop pretending to be what they need us to be. Selene's expression cracked, vulnerability flickering through. What if I am not strong enough? What if the Council is right and I... Vaelor cupped her face, stopped her spiral with a single touch. Then we fail together. But at least we fail honestly. Tears welled in her silver eyes. No one has ever chosen me before. Everyone else just tried to control me or kill me. I know. But I am not choosing to control you. I am choosing to stand beside you. There's a difference. Selene leaned into his palm. For just a moment, she looked impossibly young, vulnerable, human. Then she straightened, decision crystallizing behind her eyes. Tell me what I need to do. The ritual itself was surprisingly simple. No elaborate ceremony, no priests, no audience. Just 2 people standing in an ancient chamber, making a choice that would alter the course of an empire. Mira had prepared the space according to texts pulled from the royal archives, candles arranged in specific patterns, herbs burning in bronze braziers, the air thick with smoke and anticipation. Vaelor and Selene stood facing each other in the center of the room. Mira spoke the words in the old language, words that bound, words that merged, words that made 2 separate powers into something unified and unstoppable. Vaelor felt it the moment the ritual took hold, a connection snapping into place between them like a bridge suddenly appearing across an impossible chasm. He gasped as Selene's presence flooded into him, her fear, her power, her rage, her desperate hope that this time, finally, someone would not betray her. And underneath all of it, something else. Recognition. She felt it too. Her eyes widened as his presence merged with hers, his control, his loneliness, his century of careful distance, his quiet desperation for something real. The bond locked into place, permanent, irreversible. Power erupted between them, silver and violet light spiraling together, merging, becoming something new. The fortress shook. The candles blew out. Reality itself seemed to bend around them as their combined strength rewrote the rules of what was possible. When it finally subsided, they were both on their knees, breathing hard, staring at each other. I can feel you, Selene whispered. Inside my head, your thoughts, your emotions, everything. I know. I feel you too. This is... She stopped, searching for words. Terrifying, Vaelor supplied. Yes, but also... Right, Selene nodded, tears streaming down her face. I have been alone my entire life, even surrounded by people. always alone, and now you are not. They stayed there, kneeling in the dark, feeling each other's presence like a second heartbeat. The bond was absolute. What she felt, he felt. Her power was his will was hers. Two broken rulers discovering they no longer had to survive alone. Outside, Thyron appeared in the doorway. His expression was grim. "My king, princess, you need to see this." They rose and followed him up the stairs to the ramparts. The northern horizon glowed orange in the dying light. Not sunset, fires, thousands of them. The council's army had arrived early, 30,000 soldiers spreading across the valley below like a living sea, siege weapons being assembled, battle standards raised, the largest military force the Empire had seen in 50 years, all of it focused on one small fortress. Beside him, Vaelor felt Selene's fear spike through the bond, followed immediately by determination. "They came to execute us," she said softly. "Yes. 30,000 soldiers, against 5,000 if we are lucky, and two people they believe are corrupted monsters." "Yes." Selene turned to look at him, silver eyes glowing in the firelight. The bond hummed between them. Absolute, unbreakable. "Good," she said, voice cold. "Final. Let them come. It is time the Empire learned what monsters actually look like when you give them no choice but to survive." Vaelor smiled, because the Council had made a critical mistake. They had spent 3 centuries teaching powerful people that fighting back made you a monster. But they never considered what would happen when someone finally decided monsters were not the ones they needed to fear. The war for the soul of the Empire was about to begin, and this time the monsters were going to win. The Council's army did not attack immediately. That was the first warning. Vaelor stood on the ramparts watching 30,000 soldiers settle into siege positions with the kind of precision that only came from extensive planning. They were not here for a quick assault. They were here to starve them out, break them slowly, make an example that would echo through the Empire for generations. Beside him, Selene radiated tension through the bond. He felt her power coiling beneath her skin like a caged animal, desperate to be released, desperate to fight. "Patience," he murmured. "Patience?" Her voice was sharp. "They have us surrounded, outnumbered 6-1. And you want patience?" "I want strategy. Rushing into battle is what they expect, what they are prepared for. We need to—" He stopped, because something was wrong. The bond flickered, just for a second, like a candle in wind. Vaelor turned to Selene. Her face had gone pale. Her silver eyes were unfocused, staring at something he could not see. "What is it?" he demanded. "I do not know. Something feels—" She gasped, stumbled. Vaelor caught her before she fell. Through the bond, he felt it too now. A pulling sensation, like something trying to sever the connection between them. "Mira!" Vaelor shouted. The physician appeared within seconds. Her face went ashen when she saw Selene's condition. "Get her inside. Now!" They carried her to the ritual chamber, later on the stone floor where they had bonded less than 12 hours earlier. Selene's body convulsed. Silver light flickered across her skin in erratic patterns. Through the bond, Vaelor felt her panic, her confusion, her terror. "What is happening to her?" he demanded. Mira examined her quickly, checked her pulse, her breathing, the constellation patterns on her skin. Then she went very still. "My king, these marks, they are changing." Vaelor looked. She was right. The silver patterns that had replaced the suppression scars were darkening, turning black, spreading like infection through her veins. "What does that mean?" "I do not know. This should not be possible. The suppression marks were removed. Her power is free. There is nothing left to—" Mira stopped. Her face went white. Unless what? Unless there was a secondary suppression, one we did not find, one designed to activate only after she bonded with someone. The implications hit Vaelor like a physical blow. A trap, yes. And if I am right, the secondary suppression is not just targeting her power. It is targeting the bond itself, trying to sever it, or worse. Worse how? Mira met his eyes. "The bond goes both ways, Your Majesty. What affects her affects you. If this suppression is designed to corrupt her power, turn it toxic. It will poison us both. Yes. Through the bond, Vaelor felt Selene's awareness returning, felt her understanding what had been done to her, what had been done to them both. Her eyes opened. Black veins crawled across the whites like cracks in porcelain. They knew, she whispered. The council knew I would try to bond with someone eventually, so they built a failsafe years ago when they first started carving the suppression marks into my skin. They hid it so deep that even removing the primary seals would not find it. Vaelor's hands clenched into fists. How long do we have? I do not know. Hours, maybe days. But the corruption is spreading. I can feel it, turning my power against itself. And through the bond, it will spread to me. Yes. Tears streaked down her face. The black veins pulsed with each heartbeat. I am so sorry. I brought this into you. I should have known, should have realized they would never let me be free. That they would... Stop. Vaelor's voice was iron. This is not your fault. This is theirs, and we will find a way to... The door burst open. Thyron stumbled in, blood streaming from a wound in his side. 3 soldiers followed him, all injured, all terrified. My king, we have a problem. What now? The northern clans, the ones you called for reinforcement, they are not coming. The words hit like a gut punch. What? Riders just returned. Every clan lord sent the same message. They will not fight against the council. They will not support a king who has bonded with corrupted blood. Thyron's voice broke. They have declared you anathema, cast out, no longer worthy of their oaths. Vaelor felt the ground shift beneath him. 70 years of carefully built alliances, decades of political maneuvering, a century of loyalty earned through blood and battle. Gone. All of it. Because he had chosen Selene over the Empire's fear. Through the bond, he felt her devastation, her guilt, her absolute certainty that she had destroyed him. There is more, Thyron said quietly. Lord Cassian Vael sent an envoy. Under banner of truce, he wants to negotiate. Negotiate what? Your life. He says if you surrender the princess to the council's justice and renounce the bond, they will allow you to abdicate peacefully, exile instead of execution, a chance to walk away. The words hung in the air like poison. Vaelor looked at Selene, at the black corruption spreading through her veins, at the terror in her silver eyes. Through the bond, he felt everything she was feeling, the hope that he would take the deal, the certainty that he should, the desperate wish that he would not. Because after a lifetime of being abandoned by everyone who claimed to care about her, she could not bear to be the reason he died. Tell Vael I will meet with him, Vaelor said. Selene's head snapped up. No, you cannot. I can, and I will. We need to understand exactly what we are facing. He turned to Mira. How long can you keep the corruption contained? A few hours? Maybe less? Then we have until nightfall. Thyron, arrange the meeting. Under full truce protocols. I want archers on every wall. Any sign of betrayal, and we end it immediately. Thyron hesitated. My king, if you go out there, I know the risks. Do it anyway. His captain bowed and left, taking the injured soldiers with him. Alone with Selene and Mira, Vaelor felt the full weight of the trap closing around them. The council had planned this perfectly. Remove Selene's primary suppression. Let her believe she was free. Wait for her to bond with someone powerful. Then trigger the secondary suppression and watch them both burn. Elegant, brutal, effective. You should take the deal, Selene said quietly. No, I am dying anyway. The corruption will kill me long before the council gets the chance. At least this way you survive. You can rebuild, find another. There is no other. Vaelor knelt beside her, took her hand. Through the bond, he pushed every ounce of certainty he possessed. Do you understand? There is no version of this where I walk away and let them kill you. I would rather die beside you than live another century alone. That is foolish. Yes, but I have spent 120 years being practical, being controlled, being the king everyone needed, and it has left me with nothing but an empire built on fear and lies. So forgive me if I choose to be foolish for once. Selene's expression cracked. I do not deserve this. I do not deserve you. Neither of us deserves any of this, but we have it anyway, so we fight, until there is nothing left to fight with. She squeezed his hand, black veins crawling further up her arm with each passing second. What if we lose? Then we lose together. But at least we lose honestly. Get. The meeting took place at sunset in the valley between the fortress and the council's siege lines. Vaelor rode out alone, against every protocol, against every survival instinct he had honed over a century of warfare. But he needed Vael to believe this was a genuine negotiation, that he was actually considering surrender. Lord Cassian Vael waited at the designated point, flanked by a dozen elite guards in council colors. He was exactly as Vaelor remembered from court, handsome in that calculated way nobles perfected, blonde hair, strong jaw, the kind of face that inspired trust right up until the knife entered your back. This was the man who had been engaged to Selene, the man who had traded her life for political favor. Vaelor dismounted, kept his expression neutral despite the rage building in his chest. Lord Vael. Your Majesty. Vael's bow was shallow, perfunctory. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know these are difficult circumstances. Difficult? That is what you call 30,000 soldiers surrounding my fortress? That is what I call mercy. The council wanted to attack immediately. I convinced them to offer terms first. Vael stepped closer, lowered his voice. You are not thinking clearly, Your Majesty. The princess has corrupted you, made you believe lies about her nature, but it is not too late. Surrender her. Renounce the bond. You can still salvage this. And what happens to her? She faces justice for her crimes. She committed no crimes. The council manufactured charges to justify her execution. Vael's expression hardened. She is sovereign blood. Her very existence threatens the stability of the empire. Surely you understand that. You who have spent a century preserving order, why would you throw everything away for one woman? Because she is the first person in decades who has made me feel anything other than empty, Vaelor thought. But he did not say that. Instead, what exactly are you offering? Vael's eyes gleamed. He thought he was winning. Abdication. Exile beyond the eastern wastelands. You keep your life and your dignity. The Empire remembers you as the king who ruled for 120 years, not the monster who betrayed everything he built. And the bond? Will be severed. The council has rituals for that. It will be painful but survivable. Once separated, the princess's corruption cannot spread to you. Vaelor pretended to consider. Let silence stretch. Watched Vael's confidence grow. Then he smiled. Cold, brutal, honest. You actually believe I would accept that? Vael's expression flickered. Your Majesty, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable would be cutting you down where you stand for daring to suggest I abandoned someone I bonded with. But I'm trying to be diplomatic. Vaelor stepped closer, dropped his voice to something lethal. Tell me, Lord Vael, when you betrayed Selene to the council, when you traded her life for political favor, did you ever stop to consider what would happen if she survived? Vael's face went pale. I did what was necessary for the Empire. You did what was necessary for yourself. The council offered you her family's lands, her titles, everything she had. All you had to do was deliver evidence of corruption, so you manufactured it, lied to her, betrayed her trust, and then you watched them drag her to the Hollowing and felt nothing. She was dangerous. She was terrified, and you used that against her. Vaelor's voice dropped further. But here's what you did not consider. She survived. She found her power, and she bonded with someone who will burn this empire to ash before letting you touch her again. Vael stepped back. His guards moved forward instinctively. You are making a mistake, Your Majesty. The corruption is already spreading through you. I can see it. You are not thinking clearly. The princess has poisoned your mind. No, she has clarified it. For the first time in a century, I see exactly what this empire has become. A machine that crushes anyone powerful enough to threaten the status quo, and I am done feeding it. Then you condemn yourself to death. Perhaps. But I will die free, which is more than you can say. Vael's expression hardened into something ugly. The council was right about you. You have been corrupted, but unlike the princess, there is no saving you. He turned to his guards. Take him. The guards moved. Vaelor's sword was already in motion. He cut down the first three before they finished drawing their weapons. The rest scattered. Vael stumbled backward, his composure finally shattering. "This is an attack under banner of truce," he shouted. "You have violated sacred law. You drew first. Your guards attacked. I simply defended myself." Vaelor leveled his blade at Vael's throat. "Now run back to your High Chancellor and tell him exactly what happened here. Tell him I will not negotiate, will not surrender. And if he wants my head, he will have to take it himself." Vael fled. Vaelor watched him go, knowing he had just burned the final bridge. No more negotiation, no more political solutions. War, total and absolute. He rode back to the fortress as night fell. On the ramparts, Thyron waited with grim news. The corruption in the princess is spreading faster. Mira says she has hours at most, and there is something else. What? Scouts report movement in the council's camp. They are preparing for a full assault, not at dawn, tonight. Of course, Vael would report the failed negotiation. The council would interpret it as provocation. They would attack while Vaelor's forces were still unprepared, while Selene was dying from the corruption they had planted inside her. Perfect strategy. If they survived the night, it would be a miracle. Vaelor found Selene in the ritual chamber, exactly where he had left her. The black veins had spread across her entire torso now, creeping toward her heart. Her breathing was labored, her skin cold. Through the bond, he felt her fading, not just her body, her will to fight. She had spent 15 years surviving, enduring, hoping that eventually someone would see past the monster the council claimed she was. And now that someone finally had, she was poisoning him with the corruption they had planted inside her decades ago. The guilt was destroying her faster than the actual poison. "I tried to remove it," Mira said quietly. "The secondary suppression, but it is too deeply rooted, tied directly to her life force. If I cut it out, she dies. If I leave it, she dies. There is no surgical solution. Then find a non-surgical one. My king, I have exhausted every option. The only thing that might work..." She stopped. "What?" "The bond. It goes both ways. She is poisoning you. But theoretically, you could reverse the flow, push the corruption back into her, overwhelm it with your own strength, and it would kill you. Your power is not like hers. You are strong, but not sovereign blood. The effort of containing her corruption would burn you out from the inside. You would have hours, maybe less." Vaelor felt Selene's awareness focus through the bond, felt her horror at what Mira was suggesting. No, she sent through their connection. Absolute. Final. "I will not let you die for me." "Then what do you suggest?" Vaelor sent back. "Let me go. The corruption is designed to spread until it kills us both. But if I sever the bond myself before it reaches you completely, you would die instantly." "Yes, but you would survive. You could rebuild, find another way to fight the council." "No. Vaelor, please, I am not worth this." He turned to face her fully, knelt beside the stone slab where she lay, took her corrupted hand in his without hesitation. "You asked me in the courtyard why I took you from the hollowing. The real reason?" Through the bond, he felt her reluctant attention. "I told you it was because I recognized something in you, that I was tired of being alone. And that was true, but it was not complete." He paused. "The complete truth is that I have spent 120 years being the kind of king who survives, who calculates, who sacrifices whatever is necessary to maintain power. And it has turned me into something I barely recognize anymore. Something cold, empty, efficient, but hollow." Tears tracked down Selene's face. "Then I saw you kneeling in those ruins, still fighting even while they killed you, and I thought, that is what I gave up. That fire. That refusal to break even when breaking would be easier. I traded it for survival, for a throne, for an empire that fears me but does not know me." He leaned closer. Let her see the truth in his eyes. "So no, I will not let you sever the bond. I will not let you die believing you are poison. Because you are the first person in a century who has reminded me what it feels like to be human, and I would rather burn out honestly beside you than survive another 100 years pretending I do not care." Selene's expression shattered. "That is the most foolish thing I have ever heard." "Yes, but I'm done being wise." Through the bond, Vaelor felt her walls crumbling, felt her desperate hope warring with her guilt, felt her love for him that she had been too terrified to acknowledge, Because that is what happens when two people who have survived by not feeling anything suddenly discover someone worth dying for. Everything changes. If you do this, Selene whispered, if you take the corruption into yourself, we both die anyway. Just slower. Maybe. Or maybe there is a third option we have not considered. What? Vaelor stood, turned to Mira. You said the secondary suppression is tied to her life force, that it is designed to spread until it kills us both. But what if we do not fight it? I do not understand. The corruption is spreading through the bond, using the connection between us as a highway. But bonds do not just carry poison, they carry power. What if instead of trying to stop the corruption, we meet it with something stronger? Understanding dawned on Mira's face, followed immediately by horror. You want to combine your power with hers, completely. Not just bonded, but merged. Yes, that has never been done. The strain alone would kill us. Yes, or it would burn out the corruption before it can establish itself. 50-50 chance. Those are terrible odds. Better than certain death. And we are out of time. Through the bond, Vaelor felt Selene's shock, felt her understanding what he was proposing, a complete merger, not just linked, but unified, one consciousness, one power, one being, irreversible, even if they survived. Are you certain? She sent through the bond. No, he sent back honestly. But I'm tired of calculating odds, so let us find out together what happens when two broken people decide to become something new. Selene pushed herself upright despite the pain, despite the corruption eating her alive. Silver eyes met violet. If we do this and survive, we will never be separate again. You understand that? Not just bonded, merged. What I am becomes what you are. What you are becomes what I am. I know. You would give up your individuality for a chance at survival? I would give up everything for a chance to stand beside you without one of us dying. Selene laughed. The sound was broken, beautiful, honest. You are insane. Yes, but so are you. That is why this might actually work. She took his hand, black veins and healthy flesh intertwining. Tell me what to do. Bhakti. The ritual was nothing like the bonding. That had been gentle, controlled, two separate powers learning to coexist. This was violence. They knelt facing each other in the ritual chamber. No ceremony, no preparation, just two people making an impossible choice in the face of certain death. Vaelor opened himself completely to the bond, dropped every wall, every defense, let Selene pour into him without reservation. She did the same. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Power erupted between them. Silver and violet light spiraling together so violently that Mira had to shield her eyes. The corruption tried to spread, tried to use the increased connection to poison them both faster, but it met something it was not designed for. Unified will. The secondary suppression had been created to target one person, one consciousness, one power source. It could not adapt fast enough when faced with two minds operating as one. Vaelor felt the moment it happened. The corruption stumbling, hesitating, searching for the individual to attack and finding only merged strength. Together, they pushed, not trying to remove the corruption. That would fail. Instead, they drove it inward, compressed it, forced it into a smaller and smaller space until the poison had nowhere left to spread. Then they burned it. Silver and violet fire meeting at the exact point where the corruption was most concentrated, obliterating it with combined force that neither could have generated alone. The corruption shattered. Vaelor felt it fracture, felt the secondary suppression finally break under pressure it was never designed to withstand. But the cost. The merger did not stop just because the corruption was gone. They had opened themselves too completely, gone too far. Their individual consciousnesses blurred together like paint mixing on canvas. Vaelor felt himself dissolving, felt Selene dissolving alongside him, felt them both becoming something else, something new, something the Empire had never seen. When the light finally faded and they collapsed to the stone floor gasping, Mira rushed forward. "My king? Princess? Can you hear me?" Vaelor opened his eyes. Except they were not just his eyes anymore. Through them, he saw the world the way Selene saw it, felt the ancient power humming beneath the earth, heard the wolves in the forest beyond the walls calling to their queen. And when he turned his head, he saw Selene staring back at him with violet eyes that glowed with traces of silver. She was seeing through his perception, too, feeling his century of tactical knowledge, his ruthless efficiency, his capacity for violence when necessary. They tried to speak, but the words came out simultaneously, identical, two voices saying the same thing, "We are alive." Mira stared at them in horror. "What have you done?" "We survived," they said together, then stopped. Tried again. This time Vaelor forced himself to speak alone. "We merged, completely. Can you separate?" He looked at Selene. Through the bond that was no longer a bond, but an integration, he felt her trying to pull back, felt himself trying to do the same. Nothing happened. They were too deeply intertwined. "No," Selene said, her voice her own but carrying echoes of his underneath. "We are one now, permanently." The implications were staggering. Two rulers, two personalities, two power sources, all contained in bodies that could no longer operate independently. Before any of them could process what had happened, Thyron burst into the chamber. "They are attacking. Full assault. The Council's entire army. They are at the gates." Vaelor stood. Selene stood with him, moving in perfect synchronization because they now shared the same tactical awareness, the same physical instinct. "How long until they breach?" Vaelor asked. "Minutes. We are outnumbered, and they have siege weapons. My king, we need to evacuate you immediately, or—" "No," Selene interrupted. "We are not running. We are ending this," Vaelor continued. "Tonight." They walked past Thyron, up the stairs, toward the ramparts where 30,000 soldiers were preparing to storm the fortress and execute everyone inside. Through their merged consciousness, they felt each other's certainty, each other's rage, each other's absolute refusal to submit. The Council had spent 3 centuries killing anyone powerful enough to threaten their control. Tonight they would discover what happened when someone finally became too powerful to kill. On the ramparts, Vaelor and Selene stood side by side. Their combined power pulsed beneath their skin, silver and violet light flickering in rhythm with shared heartbeat. Below, the Council's army advanced, siege towers, battering rams, thousands of soldiers chanting prayers to gods who were not listening. Vaelor felt Selene's power rising, felt his own tactical knowledge merging with her raw strength, felt something impossible taking shape between them. "Are you ready?" he asked. "We are always ready," she replied, using we intentionally, because there was no more separation, no more individual, only merged consciousness inhabiting 2 bodies. They raised their hands together and showed the Empire what sovereign blood actually meant when it stopped apologizing for existing. Power erupted from their joined hands like a star being born. Silver and violet light spiraled together, no longer 2 separate forces, but a unified storm that rewrote the fundamental rules of what human beings could contain. The fortress walls cracked beneath the pressure. The air itself screamed. Every living thing within a mile radius felt it in their bones, a presence so absolute that instinct overrode thought. This was what sovereign blood meant when it stopped pretending to be controllable. Below, the Council's army faltered, soldiers stumbled, siege towers groaned to a halt. Even the war horses reared back, their animal brains recognizing a predator so far above them in the hierarchy that resistance was suicide. Vaelor felt his consciousness bleeding into Selene's, felt her pouring into him. 120 years of tactical warfare merging with centuries of inherited power that had waited generations to be unleashed. They were no longer 2 people coordinating. They were one entity operating through 2 bodies, and that entity was done being hunted. Selene raised her left hand. Vaelor raised his right. The movement was identical, synchronized, inevitable. The earth beneath this council's front line split open. Not a crack, a chasm. 30 feet wide and impossibly deep, swallowing siege engines whole. Soldiers scrambled backwards, screaming. The chanting prayers died in their throats. This was not battle. This was judgment delivered by something that existed outside their understanding of power. Through their merged consciousness, Vaelor felt Selene's rage channeling through his century of controlled violence, felt his strategic mind directing her raw strength with surgical precision. They had spent their lives being told they were too dangerous to exist, that their power needed to be contained, suppressed, buried. The council was about to learn what happened when you spent 3 centuries teaching powerful people that fighting back made them monsters. Eventually, someone stopped caring about the label. From the council's command pavilion, the High Chancellor's voice cut through the chaos, amplified by magic. Hold your ground! She is one woman, corrupted, dying. This is illusion born from desperation. Vaelor smiled. Through their merged perception, he felt Selene doing the same. One woman, they said together, their voices carrying across the valley with preternatural clarity. You still believe that is what you are facing? They stepped forward in perfect unison. Their combined power pulsed outward like a shockwave. Every torch in the council's camp extinguished simultaneously. Darkness fell over 30,000 soldiers like a curtain. Then the wolves came. Not from the forest this time. From everywhere. As if the ancient creatures had been waiting centuries for this exact moment. They materialized from shadows, from between trees, from places that should have been empty. Hundreds of them. Thousands, their eyes glowing silver in the darkness. But they did not attack. They simply surrounded the council's army in a living wall of fur and fangs and patient hunger, waiting for the command that would turn waiting into violence. The High Chancellor's amplified voice cracked slightly. This is forbidden magic, abomination. Kill them! Kill them now! The council's elite guards surged forward, 50 of their finest warriors, blessed with whatever ancient power the council still possessed. They hit the chasm edge and leaped, their bodies carried by magic across the impossible distance. Vaelor met them personally. His sword was already moving before they landed, a century of muscle memory merging with Selene's enhanced perception. He saw the attacks coming before they happened, blocked strikes that should have been impossible to predict. His blade found throats with surgical precision, but it was not just his skill anymore. Through their merged consciousness, Selene fed him strength beyond what his body should contain. When a warrior's sword shattered his guard and drove toward his chest, silver light hardened his skin into something that steel could not penetrate. The blade snapped. Vaelor's response did not. Around him, his garrison fought with renewed desperation. They had seen their king become something else, something that made even the council's blessed warriors look mortal by comparison. Hope flickered where there had been only resignation, but the numbers were still wrong. 50 elite warriors died in the first wave. The council sent 500 in the second. They poured across the chasm on bridges of conjured stone, professional, coordinated. Whatever fear they felt, they buried beneath training and conviction. These were not conscripts. These were believers who would die before questioning their holy mission to purge corruption from the empire. Vaelor felt them coming through Selene's expanded awareness, felt her tactical mind, now merged with his, calculating the mathematics of violence. 50 defenders could not hold 500, not for long. Even with their combined power, they could not be everywhere simultaneously. We need to end this quickly, Selene's thought merged with his. Agreed. His response merged with hers. The command pavilion. Cut off the head. Dangerous. We would have to go through their entire army. Yes. But we are no longer bound by what individual humans can survive. Through their merged consciousness, they reached a decision that was somehow both reckless and inevitable. They would not fight defensively, would not try to hold the fortress against impossible odds. They would attack. Vaelor turned to Thyron, who was bleeding from a dozen wounds but still fighting. Hold the walls. We are going to end this. Thyron's eyes widened. My king, you cannot mean... We are walking straight through their army to the High Chancellor. Anyone who interferes dies. When we reach the command pavilion, you push forward with everything you have. Understood? That is suicide. No, that is evolution. Vaelor smiled, and Thyron actually stepped back from the expression on his face. The council wanted monsters. We are going to give them exactly what they asked for. Selene was already moving toward the gates. Vaelor moved with her. 2 bodies, 1 consciousness, 1 purpose. The fortress gates opened. Vaelor and Selene walked out into an army of 30,000 soldiers, completely alone, glowing with power that should not exist. The council's forces hesitated. This was wrong. Nothing in their training prepared them for enemies who walked calmly into certain death with expressions of absolute certainty. Then the first line attacked. What followed was not battle. It was demonstration. Vaelor's sword moved through soldiers like they were made of paper. But it was not just his skill. Selene's power hardened his strikes, accelerated his reflexes, expanded his awareness until he knew where every enemy was within 50 feet. He did not think, did not plan, just moved and killed and moved again. Beside him, Selene fought without weapons. Silver fire erupted from her hands, not burning flesh, but stopping hearts. The ancient power of sovereign blood, recognizing that sometimes mercy meant ending things quickly rather than prolonging suffering. Men fell without marks on their bodies, their last expressions showing confusion rather than pain. But understanding what they were doing required understanding what sovereign blood actually was. For 3 centuries, the Council had taught the Empire that sovereign blood was corruption, unnatural power that turned people into monsters. But that was propaganda designed to justify genocide. The truth was simpler and infinitely more threatening to anyone who ruled through fear. Sovereign blood was evolution. The original humans who had built the first kingdoms possessed this power naturally. They could command animals, read emotions, influence the weather through sheer force of will. They were not corrupted. They were what humanity was meant to become before politics decided that evolution was too dangerous to allow. The Council had not been fighting monsters for 300 years. They had been murdering their own potential. And now 2 people who had survived their systematic extermination were walking through an army demonstrating exactly why that genocide had been necessary for the Council's survival. Because how do you control a population when some of them can rewrite the rules through will alone? The answer was simple. You kill them while they are children, before they understand what they are. Selene and Vaelor had both survived past that killing window. Now the Council would pay for their efficiency failure. They carved through 100 soldiers, 200. The Council's forces pressed in from all sides but could not coordinate effectively. Every attempt to surround them met silver fire or surgical sword work that ended lives before tactics could be implemented. Vaelor felt wounds opening across his body, felt Selene's power sealing them closed almost as quickly, felt his tactical knowledge directing her attention to threats she might miss. They were not invincible. They were simply operating at a level of unified coordination that individual humans could not match. But the cost was mounting. Through their merged consciousness, Vaelor felt Selene's energy depleting, felt his own body approaching its physical limits. They had burned away the corruption, but the merger itself was consuming them. 2 consciousnesses operating as one required constant power to maintain, power they were spending faster than their bodies could regenerate. We have minutes, Selene's thought merged with his. Maybe less. Then we make them count. His thought merged with hers. They pushed deeper into the Council's army. Soldiers died. Blood soaked the earth. The wolves circled closer, their patience wearing thin, waiting for permission to join the slaughter. Not yet, they commanded through instinct that transcended language. The wolves held position, barely. Ahead, the command pavilion came into view. White silk banners bearing the Council's golden seal, guards in ceremonial armor that marked them as the High Chancellor's personal protection. Behind them, the man himself stood on a raised platform, his white robes pristine despite the carnage, his expression twisted with rage and fear. Beside him stood Lord Cassian Vale and Lady Elira, both in armor now, both armed, both looking at Vaelor and Selene with expressions that mixed hatred and terror. "You see?" the High Chancellor shouted to his army. "You see what happens when corruption is allowed to flourish. They are not human anymore. They are abominations that must be purged." Vaelor and Selene stopped 50 feet from the pavilion. Blood dripped from Vaelor's sword. Silver fire still flickered around Selene's hands. Around them, Council soldiers formed a careful circle but did not attack. They had seen what happened to those who tried. "Not human," Selene said, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "That is what you have been telling yourselves. That is how you justify 3 centuries of genocide." "You murdered children," Vaelor continued. "Entire bloodlines, families who committed no crime beyond being born with power you could not control." "We preserved civilization," the High Chancellor spat. "Before the purges, sovereign blood tore the Empire apart. Civil wars, destruction. They were too powerful to coexist with ordinary humans." "They were too powerful to let you rule," Selene corrected. "That is what you actually mean. The first kings were sovereign blood. They built this empire. Then ordinary humans like you discovered you could kill them if you struck while they were young, before they understood their strength. So you weaponized fear, created a religion around calling them corrupted. and systematically erase them from history. The High Chancellor's face darkened. You think you have won, but you are dying. I can see it. The merger is consuming you. Your bodies cannot sustain what you have become. In minutes, you will burn out from the inside. And then we will execute what remains, and the Empire will remember you as the monsters who nearly destroyed everything. Through their merged consciousness, Vaelor felt the truth of those words. The High Chancellor was not wrong. They were burning out. The merger had saved them from the corruption, but at a cost neither had fully calculated. Their bodies were not designed to contain two consciousnesses operating as one. The strain was catastrophic. They had minutes left, maybe less. But sometimes minutes are enough. You are right, Vaelor said calmly. We are dying, but we are going to accomplish something before we burn out. What? We are going to show the Empire what you actually are. Selene raised her hands, not to attack, to reveal. Silver light poured from her palms, but this time it did not destroy. It illuminated, reached into the command pavilion, and wrapped around the High Chancellor like chains made of truth. Ancient magic, the kind that forced honesty from whoever it touched. The High Chancellor's expression twisted with panic. He tried to resist, but sovereign blood recognized no authority except its own. His mouth opened and words poured out, not the ones he intended to speak, the ones he had been hiding. The Council has been manipulating the Empire for 300 years. We fabricated prophecies, manufactured wars, assassinated kings who questioned our authority. We created the sovereign blood purges not to protect civilization, but to eliminate competition. We rule through fear because, without fear, we are nothing. Just ordinary men who seized power through genocide and have been desperately holding on to it ever since. The words echoed across the battlefield. 30,000 soldiers heard them. Every noble house representative, every guard, every believer who had marched north convinced they were fighting holy corruption. Silence fell. The kind of silence that precedes revolutions. The High Chancellor realized what he had said, what Selene had forced him to confess. His face went pale. That was, I did not, she is manipulating. No, Vaelor interrupted. That is sovereign blood's original purpose, not corruption, truth. The first kings used this power to prevent exactly what you have done. They could force honesty from their advisors, from themselves. They built an empire where lies could not hide, and you murdered them because truth was too dangerous for people like you. Lord Cassian Vael stepped forward, his face twisted with desperation. This proves nothing. She has corrupted the High Chancellor, made him speak lies. Has she? Vaelor looked at Vael. Selene, ask Lord Vael about the night he betrayed you. Silver light touched Cassian. His body went rigid, his mouth opened. Words poured out before he could stop them. I was never in love with her. I wanted her lands, her titles. The Council offered me everything if I delivered evidence of corruption. So I manufactured it, lied to her, made her believe I cared while documenting every moment of vulnerability. I gave it all to the Council and watched them drag her away without feeling anything except relief that I would finally get what I deserved. Silence. Elira tried to step back, but Silver Light found her too. I was jealous. She had power I would never possess. Beauty, strength. Everyone looked at her and saw something special while they looked at me and saw nothing. So when the Council approached me, I gave them everything. Her routines, her weaknesses, the location of her safe houses. I testified against her knowing they would kill her. And I felt satisfied. Because if I could not be special, at least I could destroy someone who was. The confessions hung in the air like poison made audible. The Council's army stared at their leaders, at the men and women who had convinced them they were fighting corruption, who had preached about purity and justice while building an empire on lies and genocide. The High Chancellor realized the moment had slipped beyond recovery. His expression hardened into something feral and desperate. "Kill them!" he screamed. "Kill them now, before they turn the entire empire against us." But the soldiers did not move, because they had just heard their leaders confess to 3 centuries of manipulation, had watched them lie about everything, had seen them use fear and propaganda to justify murdering anyone who threatened their control. And humans, for all their flaws, eventually reach a breaking point where they stop following leaders who treat them like disposable tools. That breaking point was now. The first soldier dropped his weapon, then another. then dozens, then hundreds. The Council's army was not defeated. It was dissolving. 30,000 men realizing simultaneously that they had been fighting on the wrong side. The High Chancellor's face went through several expressions at once: rage, terror, disbelief. Then he made the mistake that defined his entire existence. He reached for a hidden blade and hurled it at Selene. The throw was perfect, aimed at her throat, enhanced with magic to ensure it would strike true. Vaelor moved without thinking. His body intercepted the blade before his consciousness fully processed the decision. The knife punched through his chest, missed his heart by inches, would have been instantly fatal for an ordinary human, but Vaelor was no longer entirely human. And through the merger, neither was Selene. She screamed, not in words, in power. The sound tore across the battlefield like a physical force. Soldiers collapsed to their knees. The command pavilion exploded into splinters. The earth itself cracked beneath the weight of her rage. Silver fire erupted from her body with such intensity that Vaelor felt his consciousness drowning in her fury, felt her losing control, felt the sovereign blood responding to her pain by eliminating the source of that pain with absolute prejudice. The High Chancellor died before he hit the ground. Not burned, not torn apart, simply stopped. His heart quit. His lungs forgot how to breathe. His brain shut down. The sovereign blood had decided he no longer deserved to exist, and reality agreed. Cassian and Elira tried to run. They made it 3 steps before wolves materialized from shadows and dragged them down. Not killing, containing, holding them for judgment. Selene turned to Vaelor, silver light still spiraling around her like a storm that could not decide whether to create or destroy. Through their merged consciousness, he felt her terror, felt her certainty that he was dying, that she had failed to protect him after everything. "I am fine," he sent through the bond. "You are not fine," she sent back. "The blade was poisoned. I can feel it spreading through you, through us. Then we deal with it together." Vaelor pulled the knife from his chest. Blood poured, but Selene's power was already sealing the wound closed. Not healing it, just preventing him from bleeding out immediately. The poison was a different problem. He could feel it moving through his veins. Not the same as the corruption. Something designed specifically to kill merged consciousnesses by forcing separation. The Council had been prepared for the possibility they might attempt this. Through their bond, Selene felt his realization, felt her own horror matching his. They have 30 seconds before the poison forces us apart, her thought merged with his. And separation will kill us both now, his thought merged with hers. We are too deeply intertwined. They looked at each other, 2 bodies containing one consciousness that was about to be torn apart by chemistry and malice. Around them, the battle had stopped. The Council's army stood frozen, watching. Vaelor's garrison waited on the fortress walls. Even the wolves had gone still. Everyone saw it happening, saw the king and the last sovereign alpha dying in front of them, saw the revolution that might have changed everything ending before it could begin. Selene's hands found Vaelor's. Her silver eyes locked onto his violet gaze. "I am not ready to lose you," she whispered. "Then do not let me go. I do not know how to stop this." "Neither do I. So we improvise." Through their merged consciousness, an idea formed. Terrible. Dangerous. Probably fatal. But they were out of options. The poison was designed to force separation by overwhelming their ability to maintain the merger. 2 consciousnesses fighting to remain unified while chemistry tried to tear them apart. What if they stopped fighting? What if instead of trying to maintain the merger through force, they let go completely, allowed the separation, but instead of pulling away from each other, they pushed deeper, merged so completely that there was nothing left to separate. Not 2 consciousnesses operating as one consciousness inhabiting 2 bodies, total unification, irreversible, absolute, final. They would cease to exist as individuals, would become something else entirely, something that had never existed before. Through the bond, they felt each other's understanding, felt the weight of what they were considering. This was not survival. This was transformation into something neither of them could predict. "If we do this," Vaelor said, "we die. Who we were dies. What emerges will be neither of us, just something new built from our combined pieces." "I know." "You would give up your identity to survive this?" Selene smiled, sad, certain, beautiful. I stopped having an identity the moment they carved the first suppression mark into my skin. Everything I am has been shaped by people trying to destroy me. So yes, I would rather become something new with you than remain something broken alone. Vaelor felt tears on his face, could not tell if they were his or hers or both. Then let us find out what we become. They closed their eyes, and instead of fighting the poison, they surrendered to it. Let it force the separation it was designed to create. But the moment their consciousnesses began pulling apart, they reversed direction, pushed into each other with every ounce of remaining strength, drove past the merger into something deeper. Fusion. The pain was indescribable, like being born and dying simultaneously. Like every memory they had ever formed was being shredded and reassembled into patterns that belonged to neither of them. Vaelor felt Selene's childhood terrors becoming his own, felt her power rewriting his understanding of what bodies could contain, felt her hope and rage and desperate love bleeding into his consciousness until he could not remember which emotions had originated with him. Selene felt his century of tactical knowledge becoming hers, felt his controlled violence and careful restraint and the loneliness of ruling alone, felt his certainty that she was worth everything he had built, crumbling and merging with her certainty that she deserved nothing, and somehow from those contradictions something new was being born. The poison shattered, not defeated, made irrelevant. There was nothing left to separate because there were no longer two consciousnesses to tear apart. Just one, unified, absolute, permanent. When they opened their eyes, the world looked different, not visually, fundamentally. They saw through four eyes simultaneously, felt two heartbeats as one rhythm, thought with one mind inhabiting two brains. When they tried to determine where Vaelor ended and Selene began, there was no answer, because that distinction no longer existed. They stood slowly, moved in perfect unison not because they were coordinating, but because they were the same entity experiencing physical space through two positions simultaneously. The army stared in stunned silence. What stood before them was no longer a king and a princess. It was something the Empire had no word for. A being powerful enough to rewrite itself at the molecular level rather than die. A fusion of tactical brutality and ancient power. A consciousness that existed outside normal human limitations because it was no longer entirely human. They turned to face the remains of the Council's army. When they spoke, both voices came out simultaneously. Identical, unified. We did not ask for this war. We wanted only to exist without persecution. But you spent 3 centuries ensuring that was impossible. You murdered children, erased bloodlines, built an empire on fear and lies. And when we survived, despite everything, you declared us corrupted and sent armies to finish what torture could not. They stepped forward. Power rippled outward like a pressure wave. So now you face a choice. The same choice you gave every sovereign blood for 300 years. Submit to those who claim authority over you, or fight for the freedom to exist without chains. Silence. Then one soldier stepped forward, dropped to one knee. Not in defeat, in acknowledgement. I choose freedom, he said. Another soldier joined him, then 10, then 100, then the entire army. 30,000 soldiers kneeling before something that had transcended the labels that defined their world. Not out of fear. Out of recognition that sometimes the monsters you are told to fight are just people who refuse to die quietly. Only the Council's elite guard remained standing. 200 warriors loyal not to truth, but to the power structure that had given them privilege. They raised their weapons, prepared to die defending leaders who had just confessed to genocide. We will not kill you, the unified consciousness said, but we will not allow you to prevent what comes next. Silver and violet light wrapped around the elite guard, not destroying, binding, holding them immobile while the Empire watched its old power structure collapse. On the command platform, Cassian, Vael, and Elira remained pinned beneath wolves. Their expressions showed not defiance, but comprehension of exactly how badly they had miscalculated. The unified consciousness walked toward them, stood looking down at the 2 people who had betrayed Selene when she was most vulnerable. What should we do with you? They asked. Through memories that belonged to both Vaelor and Selene, they felt the impulse for vengeance, for making these traitors suffer as Selene had suffered, as countless sovereign blood had suffered before her. But they also felt Vaelor's century of understanding that vengeance without purpose was just cruelty wearing a different name. Death ends fear too quickly, they said, and you deserve to live long enough to understand irrelevance. They stripped Cashin and Elira of their titles, their lands, their names, exiled them beyond the eastern wastelands, where they would survive as nobodies among the ruins the council had created. Fates worse than execution for people who had built their entire identities on status and privilege. Then the unified consciousness turned to face the Empire. 30,000 soldiers still kneeling, the fortress garrison watching from the walls. The nobles who had ridden with the council's army, realizing too late that they had chosen the losing side. This empire was built on suppression, they said, on fear, on the systematic murder of anyone powerful enough to threaten those in control. That ends tonight. Not through conquest, through choice. They raised their hands. Silver and violet light spiraled upward into the storm clouds that had gathered throughout the battle. We offer a compact. The same terms the first sovereign blood kings offered before the council corrupted their legacy. Rule through truth. Govern with transparency. Anyone who lies to gain power will face what the High Chancellor faced. Anyone who weaponizes fear will be exiled. And anyone born with power will be protected, trained, welcomed. Never again will children be murdered for threatening the status quo. Thunder rolled across the valley. Those who accept these terms remain. Those who cannot live in an empire without deception, leave now. We will not stop you, but we will not allow you to rebuild what just fell. For a long moment, no one moved. Then nobles began dismounting, walking forward, kneeling beside the soldiers in acknowledgement that the old order was dead and something new was being born. Some turned and fled, maybe 100, maybe more, choosing exile over submission to rulers they could not manipulate. The unified consciousness watched them go without regret, because empires built on fear always crumble eventually. The only question is whether they collapse into chaos or transform into something better. Tonight, the Iron Dominion had chosen transformation. As dawn broke over the northern cliffs, the unified consciousness that had been Vaelor and Selene stood on the fortress ramparts, looking out over an army that had become an audience to their own revolution. They felt the exhaustion in both bodies, felt the toll the merger had taken, felt themselves beginning to understand the price of what they had become. Two people who had loved each other enough to give up their individual existences now inhabited bodies that could never be truly separate again. They would never know privacy, never have thoughts that belonged only to themselves, never experience isolation because they were perpetually accompanied by their other half. Some would call that loss. They called it freedom, because loneliness was the prison they had both spent lifetimes trapped inside. And if the price of escape was surrendering the boundaries between self and other, that seemed like a bargain worth taking. Through their unified perception, they felt Thyron approaching from behind, felt his uncertainty about what to call them now, how to address a being that was both his king and not his king. "Your Majesty," he said finally, defaulting to familiar protocol. "The council is dead. The army has sworn allegiance, but the noble houses beyond this valley will not accept this easily. They will call you usurpers, monsters, corrupted by power." "We know," they replied. "Let them come. We have 3 centuries of lies to dismantle, 3 centuries of murdered bloodlines to avenge, and all the time in the world to do it. And if they unite against you, then we will show them what happens when you give powerful people no choice but to become the monsters you name them." Thyron nodded slowly, understanding that the being before him was done compromising, done apologizing for surviving, done pretending that power was something to be ashamed of rather than respected. He bowed and withdrew. The unified consciousness remained on the ramparts as the sun climbed higher. Around them, the fortress came alive. Soldiers tending wounds, physicians moving among the dying, the work of survival beginning now that the battle had ended. But somewhere in the south, in the capital city where the council had maintained power for 300 years, a different kind of preparation was beginning, because news of what happened tonight would spread. The High Chancellor's confession, the army that knelt to monsters, the king and princess who had merged into something that should not exist. Fear would spread faster than truth, always did. And fear made people dangerous. The unified consciousness felt it coming through instinct that transcended normal human prediction. Felt the empire fracturing into factions. Felt civil war brewing beneath the surface tension. Felt the real battle beginning now that the opening move had been won. "Are you ready?" they asked themselves. "We have no choice," they answered themselves. "We became this to survive. Now we discover if survival was worth the price." They turned from the ramparts, walked back into the fortress where physicians waited to treat wounds that were already healing through power no ordinary human possessed. Behind them, the sun rose over an empire that no longer knew what it was becoming, only that it would never be the same. And in the shadows of the southern capital, in rooms where the council's surviving members gathered in secret, plans were being made. Plans to reclaim what had been taken. Plans to prove that monsters were still monsters regardless of how powerful they became. Plans that would test whether two people who loved each other enough to become one being could survive an empire determined to tear them apart. The war for the Iron Dominion's soul was just beginning, and this time, the monsters were coming for everyone who had ever called them corrupted. The southern capital burned 3 weeks later. Not from siege, not from conquest, from truth. The unified consciousness that had been Vaelor and Selene stood in the Hall of Thrones, watching marble columns crack beneath the weight of revelations they had forced into daylight. Through their merged perception, they felt the empire fracturing in real time. Felt generations of carefully constructed lies collapsing like buildings with rotten foundations. The council's archives had been thorough, meticulous even. 3 centuries of documentation proving exactly what the High Chancellor had confessed under Sovereign Blood's compulsion. Fabricated prophecies, engineered civil wars, assassination orders signed by men who called themselves holy while ordering the murder of children. They had published everything, every document, every order, every lie that had built the empire's power structure. The reaction was not immediate revolution. It was something slower, more corrosive. The kind of disillusionment that spreads through populations like poison through groundwater until suddenly everyone realizes simultaneously that the foundation they built their lives on never existed. Trust shattered, not just in the council, in every institution the council had touched, which was all of them. Some nobles fled to their estates and barricaded themselves inside. Others burned their family archives before the unified consciousness could seize them. A few had the spine to stand trial. Most did not survive what came next, because the empire had spent 3 centuries demanding accountability from the powerless. Now the powerful were learning what accountability actually felt like. Through their merged awareness, they felt Thyron approaching across the throne room. His steps echoed in the vast emptiness. Most of the court had abandoned the capital. Those who remained did so out of conviction rather than obligation. "Your Majesty," he began, then stopped. The titles still did not fit right. They were both king and not king, both Vaelor and not Vaelor. Language had not evolved fast enough to accommodate what they had become. "We know," they said before he could continue. "The northern provinces are in open rebellion. Lord Vaelor has declared himself regent and is marching south with 15,000 soldiers." Thyron's expression showed surprise that they already knew. He was still adjusting to the reality that they possessed awareness beyond normal human perception. That they could feel the empire's pulse through networks of power. Selene's sovereign blood had spent weeks carefully threading through the kingdom's infrastructure. "How do you want to respond?" he asked. "We do not." "My king." They held up a hand. Thyron fell silent. "Lord Vaelor believes he is fighting corruption," they continued. He watched the High Chancellor's confession and concluded we forced false testimony through dark magic. He saw us merge into something that should not exist and decided we are exactly what the council claimed, a threat to civilization itself. We could fight him, could destroy his army the same way we destroyed the council's forces at the fortress. But that would only prove his point, that power like ours cannot coexist with ordinary humanity. Then what do you propose? We give him what he wants. A meeting. Face to face. No armies, no deception, just truth delivered without compulsion. And we let him decide what happens next. Thyron's face darkened. That is suicide. Vaelor is not interested in negotiation. He wants your head. Both of your heads. However that works now. We know. But we have spent 3 weeks forcing change through power. And we are watching the empire tear itself apart because people are terrified of what we represent. So perhaps it is time to try a different approach. One that does not require submission, just understanding. You truly believe he will listen? No. But we have to try anyway. Because if we rule through fear the same way the council did, we have simply replaced one tyranny with another. The labels might change, but the oppression remains identical. Thyron was quiet for a long moment. Then he bowed. As you command. I will arrange the meeting, but I'm coming with you. And if Vaelor makes a move against you, I am ending him before his sword clears the scabbard. They smiled, both faces simultaneously. Fair enough. Talk. The meeting took place in neutral territory 7 days later, an abandoned monastery on the border between the northern provinces and the capital territories. Stone walls weathered by centuries, empty halls that had once housed seekers of wisdom before the council declared independent thought dangerous and scattered them to the winds. Appropriate location for what was about to unfold. The unified consciousness arrived alone despite Thyron's protests. Walked through crumbling archways into a central courtyard where Lord Vaelor waited with a dozen armed guards in formation behind him. Vaelor was exactly as they remembered from court functions. Tall, scarred from a lifetime of military service. Gray hair pulled back in the northern style. Face weathered by wind and warfare until it resembled carved granite. He had been one of Vaelor's most loyal bannermen for 40 years. Had fought beside him in 3 different campaigns. Had saved his life twice. Now he stood with his hand on his sword hilt, looking at them like they were strangers wearing familiar faces. Your Majesty, he said. The title carried weight, but no warmth. Or should I call you something else now? I confess I do not know the proper address for whatever you have become. Vaelor is fine, they replied. Though we understand the confusion. Confusion. Vaelor's laugh was bitter. That is one word for it. I watched you walk into the council's army and carve through 500 men like they were wheat. Watched you merge with the cursed princess until you became something that should not exist. And now you sit on the throne, publishing documents that condemn 3 centuries of governance as genocide while the empire burns around you. So yes, I am confused. The documents are authentic. I do not care if they are authentic. Vaelor's voice rose. Every kingdom is built on blood and compromise. Every ruler makes terrible choices to preserve order. You think you discovered some great truth. You just exposed the machinery that keeps civilization functioning. And now people who never had to make hard decisions are judging those who did. It is chaos. Anarchy. Everything we fought to prevent. We did not fight to preserve lies. No. We fought to preserve stability. And stability requires certain fictions. Requires people accepting the authority of those in power, even when that authority is imperfect. You have destroyed that, shattered the illusion that keeps populations from tearing each other apart. And for what? To prove you were right? To avenge a woman who was correctly identified as a threat? They felt anger rising through both bodies simultaneously. Felt Selene's centuries of inherited trauma merging with Vaelor's fury at watching someone he had trusted reveal exactly how shallow that trust had been. She was not a threat, they said quietly. She was a child born with power she did not ask for. Tortured for 15 years because frightened men decided evolution was too dangerous to allow. And you, they stopped, forced control through merged discipline. When they spoke again, their voice was calmer, colder. You called us here to justify rebellion, to explain why you will not serve a corrupted king. So make your case. We will listen without prejudice. Then we will respond. And you will decide whether our response warrants the civil war you are planning. Vaelor studied them for a long moment. Then he gestured to his guards. They stepped back. Not far, but enough to indicate this was negotiation rather than ambush. For now. Very well, Vaelor said. My case is simple. You bonded with sovereign blood, merged with it until you became something neither human nor monster, but something between. You possess power that no single person should contain, and you are using that power to rewrite the empire according to your personal sense of justice, without consultation or restraint. That is tyranny, regardless of how you justify it. And your alternative? The unified consciousness already knew, had felt it the moment they entered the courtyard, but they needed Vaelor to say it aloud, needed him to speak his truth the same way they had been forced to speak theirs. Abdication, Vaelor said. Both of you. Step down. Allow a council of noble houses to govern until proper succession can be established. Accept exile beyond the western mountains where your influence cannot spread. In exchange, we allow you to live separately. The merger is severed. You return to being individual humans, and the empire rebuilds without the threat of sovereign blood destroying everything our ancestors created. You mean the threat of sovereign blood destroying everything you inherited through genocide, they corrected. Call it what you want. The result is the same. You are too powerful to be allowed near civilization. The council understood that. They went too far in their methods, but their conclusion was correct. People like you cannot coexist with people like us. People like us, they repeated. You mean ordinary humans? Yes. And you believe we are no longer ordinary. I know you are not. I watched you become something else, something that rewrites reality through will alone. That is not human. That is divine or demonic, depending on perspective. Either way, it has no place in mortal governance. The unified consciousness was quiet for a moment. Processing. Feeling both Vaelor's century of understanding political reality and Selene's lifetime of being judged for existence, she could not control. You are right, they said finally. Bashir blinked. What? You are right. We are no longer entirely human. We possess power that ordinary people cannot match, and we have been using that power to force change without consultation. That is tyranny, regardless of how we justify it. Bashir's expression shifted, from defensive aggression to cautious hope. Then you will accept the terms? No. The hope died. Then what? We will offer you a counterproposal. They stepped forward. Bashir's guards tensed but did not draw weapons. Not yet. We will submit to judgment, not from noble houses who inherited their power through the same system we are dismantling, from a trial by assembly. Every province sends representatives, common citizens, not nobility, not clergy, just people who have lived under the empire's governance and can judge whether our actions have helped or harmed them. They hear evidence from both sides. They decide our fate, and we accept their verdict without resistance. Bashir's eyes narrowed. You would trust commoners to judge a king? We would trust the people we claim to serve to decide whether our service has value. If they condemn us, we accept exile. If they support us, you withdraw your rebellion and accept their authority. And if I refuse, then we fight. You bring your 15,000 soldiers. We meet them with power you cannot match, and we destroy each other while the empire burns. But at least we will have chosen honesty over survival, which is more than the council ever did. Silence. Bashir looked at them, really looked, trying to see past the merged consciousness to the man he had fought beside for 4 decades, searching for any trace of the king he remembered. What he found was both less and more than expected. Less because Vaelor Draven, as he had existed, was gone. The cold strategic king who ruled through calculated brutality no longer lived inside the merged being standing before him. More because what replaced him was something that cared in ways the old Vaelor never had. That valued truth over efficiency. That would risk everything for principles the old king would have sacrificed without hesitation. You have changed, Bashir said quietly. Yes, because we were given a choice. Remain what we were and die, or become something new and survive. We chose survival, and it cost us everything we thought defined us. But it gave us something better, purpose beyond power, connection beyond control, a reason to rule that has nothing to do with fear. And if the assembly condemns you, then we were wrong, and the empire deserves leadership that better understands what its people need. Bashir was quiet for a very long time. Outside, wind moved through the abandoned monastery. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. They felt the ancient creature through Selene's expanded awareness, felt it recognizing its queen and calling acknowledgement. Bashir heard it too. His hand tightened on his sword hilt. You command them, he said. The wolves. The old stories were true. Yes. Sovereign blood evolved to exist in harmony with the natural world. The council called it corruption because they could not control it. But it is simply what humans were meant to become before fear made us choose stagnation. And you believe ordinary people will accept that? We believe they deserve the choice. The same choice the council spent 3 centuries denying them. Another silence. Longer this time. Heavier. Then Vashir's hand fell away from his sword. Very well. I will agree to your trial. But know this. If the assembly supports you, and I believe they were coerced or manipulated, I will resume my rebellion. And next time I will not come alone. Every northern house will march with me. We will burn this empire to bedrock before allowing sovereign blood to rule unchallenged. Fair enough, they said. We would expect nothing less. No. The trial took 3 months to assemble. Representatives from every province, farmers, merchants, soldiers, physicians, people who had never seen the capital before suddenly thrust into deciding the fate of an empire. The council's surviving members testified. Nobles who had benefited from the old system testified. Common citizens who had watched their children murdered for showing signs of sovereign blood testified. The unified consciousness sat through all of it without speaking. They heard themselves called saviors, heard themselves called monsters, heard accusations that ranged from justified to absurd. And through it all, they remained silent. Let the empire speak without interruption, without defense, because defense implied they feared the verdict, and they did not. Not because they were certain of acquittal, but because they had spent 3 months learning something Vaelor had never understood in a century of ruling. That true power was not the ability to impose your will on others. It was the ability to accept judgment from those you served and trust them to be wiser than your fear. On the final day, they were allowed to speak. They stood before an assembly of 500 representatives in the Hall of Thrones that had been redesigned to accommodate them. No elevated platform, no throne, just a floor where everyone stood as equals. We will not defend our actions, they said. You have heard testimony. You have seen evidence. You know what we did and why. The only thing we will add is this. They paused. Let silence settle. Let the assembly feel the weight of what came next. The council ruled through fear for 300 years. They called it order, called it civilization, called it necessary evil. And perhaps by their measure, it was. Perhaps genocide and suppression and systematic lies were required to maintain the stability they achieved. We do not claim moral superiority. We simply chose a different path. One that prioritizes truth over comfort, freedom over security, evolution over stagnation. And if you decide that path leads to destruction rather than progress, we will accept your judgment and withdraw. But we will not apologize for trying. The assembly deliberated for 2 days. On the morning of the 3rd day, they delivered their verdict. By a margin of 7 votes, they chose to support the unified consciousness. Not because they trusted what Vaelor and Selene had become, but because they were tired of being ruled by people who lied about everything, tired of watching their children murdered for being different, tired of an empire that demanded their obedience while giving nothing in return except survival. The verdict was not triumph. It was exhausted acceptance that sometimes monsters were preferable to the alternatives. Vashir kept his word, withdrew his rebellion, bent knee to the judgment of commoners he had not trusted to think for themselves. But his expression when he did so carried a promise. This was not over. It was simply postponed. 6 months after the trial, the unified consciousness stood on the northern cliffs where their story had begun. The fortress below had been converted into an academy, a place where children born with sovereign blood could be trained instead of murdered, where power was taught to coexist with responsibility, where evolution was encouraged rather than exterminated. 43 students so far, ranging from 6 years old to 16. All of them had been scheduled for execution before the council fell. All of them now learning to master abilities the Empire had spent centuries calling corruption. Through merged awareness, they felt each student simultaneously, felt their fear, their hope, their desperate need to prove they were not monsters. It reminded them of Selene kneeling in the burning ruins, still defiant after everything they had done to break her. "We are doing the right thing," Selene's portion of their consciousness whispered. "Are we?" Vaelor's portion whispered back. "Or are we simply creating the next generation of beings too powerful for ordinary humans to accept? Lord Vashir believes we are engineering our own extinction, that eventually there will be too many sovereign blood and they will eliminate everyone else. Then we teach them better. We show them what we learned, that power without empathy is just tyranny wearing different labels. And if they do not listen, then we failed. But at least we failed trying. Through their unified perception, they felt Thyron approaching from behind. His steps were slower than they used to be. The battle at the fortress had aged him. Injuries that would not fully heal, weariness that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "Your Majesty," he said, "the southern provinces are requesting your presence. They want to establish their own sovereign blood academy. They need guidance on—" "Tell them yes," the unified consciousness interrupted. "Whatever resources they need, whatever support, we will provide it." Thyron nodded, hesitated, then spoke the question he had been carrying for months. "Do you regret it, becoming what you are?" They considered, really considered, felt both Vaelor's century of memories and Selene's lifetime of trauma. Felt what they had given up to survive. Individual identity, privacy, the ability to exist separately. All of it sacrificed for fusion that could never be reversed. Every day, they said honestly. "We regret it every single day." Thyron's expression showed shock. "Then why?" "Because regret does not mean it was wrong. It means it cost something, and everything worth doing costs something. We gave up who we were to become something that could change the Empire. That trade was necessary, but we are allowed to mourn what we lost even while accepting what we gained." Thyron absorbed that, nodded slowly. "You are not the king I remember." "No. That king died in the ritual chamber when we merged. What we are now is something else, something built from his pieces and hers, neither of them, but carrying both within us. It is strange, uncomfortable, sometimes unbearable, but it is ours, and we chose it honestly." Thyron bowed and withdrew. They remained on the cliff watching the sun set over the empire they had fractured and were now trying to rebuild. Through merged awareness, they felt the kingdom breathing, felt its fear, its hope, its desperate uncertainty about what came next. They felt themselves reflected in that uncertainty, because they did not know what came next either, did not know if sovereign blood academies would create a better future or simply new tyrants, did not know if the assembly's support would last or collapse the moment they made an unpopular decision, did not know if what they had become was evolution or abomination. They only knew they were done pretending to have answers. The council had ruled through certainty, through absolute conviction that they knew what was best for everyone. And that certainty had justified 3 centuries of genocide. So they would rule through doubt, through admitting they did not know, through trusting that uncertainty was more honest than false confidence. It would not be easy. Would probably fail more often than it succeeded, but at least it would be real. Through their bond that was no longer a bond, but an integration, they felt both halves of their consciousness reaching agreement. "Are you ready?" they asked themselves. "We have no choice," they answered themselves. "We became this to survive. Now we discover if survival was worth the price." Behind them, wolves howled in the forest, calling to their queen, calling acknowledgement, calling promise that whatever came next, she would not face it alone. They smiled, both faces simultaneously, turned from the cliff, and walked back into the empire that no longer knew what it was becoming, only that it would never be the same. Years passed. The unified consciousness ruled not through fear but through presence. They traveled constantly, visiting provinces, meeting citizens, listening to complaints and implementing changes and admitting when they were wrong. It was exhausting, inefficient, nothing like the controlled brutality Vaelor had perfected over a century. But it worked, slowly, imperfectly, with constant setbacks and failures. But it worked. Sovereign blood academies spread across the empire. Children who would have been murdered learned to master abilities that had been called corruption. Some struggled, some failed. A few had to be contained when their power overwhelmed their control. But most thrived. Most became living proof that evolution was not something to fear, but something to embrace. The assembly became permanent. Elected representatives replacing hereditary nobility. Commoners governing alongside those who had inherited power. It was messy, filled with arguments and political maneuvering and occasional corruption, but it was also honest, real, built on consensus rather than intimidation. Not everyone accepted the changes. 3 more rebellions erupted in the first decade, each one led by nobles who believed the old ways were worth fighting for. Each one defeated not through military superiority, but through exhaustion. Through citizens refusing to fight for leaders who offered nothing except nostalgia for systems that had oppressed them. Eventually, even the most stubborn holdouts realized the empire had changed beyond recognition, that what Vaelor and Selene had become was not temporary aberration, but permanent evolution. Some fled beyond the borders, established exile communities where the old hierarchies still functioned, where sovereign blood was still called corruption. Most stayed, adapted, learned to exist in an empire that valued truth over tradition. On the 20th anniversary of the trial, the unified consciousness returned to Dreadmoor Forest, the place where Selene had been sentenced to the hollowing, where Vaelor had violated 3 centuries of neutrality to carry her out of the burning ruins, where everything had begun. It looked different now. The execution grounds had been converted into memorial gardens, flowers blooming where ashes once covered the earth, stones marking the names of every sovereign blood murdered by the council, thousands of them, children mostly, their only crime being born different. They walked among the stones reading names, feeling the weight of generations lost to fear, feeling both grief for what could have been and determination that it would never happen again. Someone approached from behind. They felt her presence through merged awareness before she spoke. An older woman, gray hair, face lined with years, but her silver eyes glowed faintly in the twilight. Sovereign Blood, one of the first students from their academy, now a teacher herself. "Your Majesty," she said, bowed. Not in submission, but in respect. "Lisa," they replied, "we did not expect to see you here. I come every year. On the anniversary of my mother's execution, she was killed here, in these ruins. When I was 6 years old, the council told me it was necessary, that she was corrupted, that I should be grateful they only murdered her and not me as well. They felt her pain through the ambient power, felt her rage that even 20 years had not fully diminished. We are sorry," they said, "for her, for all of them, for the empire that allowed this to continue for so long." Lysa shook her head. "You have nothing to apologize for. You are the reason I survived, the reason any of us survived. And I wanted you to know that, whatever doubts you carry, whatever regrets, you saved us, not just from death, but from believing we deserved it." They felt tears on both faces simultaneously, could not tell which consciousness they originated from. Perhaps both. "Thank you," they said quietly. Lysa bowed again and withdrew into the memorial gardens. They remained standing among the stones as night fell. Through merged awareness, they felt the empire breathing around them, felt its millions of lives continuing, felt the children learning in academies, felt the assembly debating policy, felt the slow, painful growth toward something better. It was not perfect, would never be perfect, but it was honest, real, built on foundations that acknowledged failure and chose to try anyway. "Do you think we did enough?" Selene's portion of their consciousness whispered. "I do not know," Vaelor's portion whispered back, "but we did what we could with what we had, and we are still here, still trying. That has to count for something. What if we are wrong? What if sovereign blood evolution leads exactly where the council feared? What if we created our own extinction? Then we created it honestly, with open eyes, giving people choice instead of imposing our will. That makes us different from the council. Not better necessarily, just different. And different is all we can offer." They stood in silence for a long time, feeling the weight of 2 decades compressed into merged consciousness, feeling both the victories and the failures, the lives saved and the mistakes made, the empire they had shattered and the one they were building from its pieces. Eventually, they turned from the memorial gardens, walked back through Dreadmoor Forest that no longer felt forbidden, back toward the fortress that had become an academy, back toward the work that would continue until their bodies finally failed or the empire decided it was done with them. Through the trees, wolves moved in parallel, guarding, accompanying, acknowledging their queen as she passed. They felt the ancient creatures through Selene's awareness, felt their patience, their acceptance, their understanding that some bonds transcended species and language and time. "We are going to die eventually," they thought to themselves. "This merger has cost us years we might have had separately. Our bodies cannot sustain this indefinitely." Yes, they agreed with themselves. But we will die having mattered, having changed something, having proven that power does not have to mean tyranny, and different does not have to mean corrupted. And when we are gone, perhaps the empire will remember that. Perhaps it will continue choosing truth over fear, or perhaps it will collapse back into old patterns. Either way, we tried. Honestly. Without reservation. That has to be enough. They emerged from this forest as dawn broke over the northern cliffs. Behind them, the memorial gardens glowed faintly with silver light. Ahead, the academy was waking, students beginning their day, teachers preparing lessons, the work of evolution continuing regardless of doubt or fear. The unified consciousness that had been Vaelor Draven and Selene Voss stood at the threshold between past and future, between what they had destroyed and what they were building, between who they had been and what they had become. Two people who had loved each other enough to give up their individual existences, who had merged into something that should not exist, who had ruled an empire not through fear, but through the revolutionary act of admitting they did not have all the answers. The empire would remember them, either as saviors or as the beginning of its end. History would decide. Centuries from now, when their choices had played out fully and the consequences were clear. But in this moment, standing in the dawn light, feeling both exhaustion and purpose, they were simply two people inhabiting one consciousness who had chosen honesty over survival. And somehow, impossibly, that had been enough. The crown always has a price, they thought to themselves. But sometimes the most dangerous rulers are the ones who already survived losing everything, who gave up even themselves to stand for something worth dying for. We paid the price, they agreed with themselves, and we would pay it again. They walked into the academy as the sun climbed higher, ready to face another day, another challenge, another opportunity to prove that power could serve rather than oppress. And behind them, in the memorial gardens where thousands of names marked the cost of fear, flowers bloomed in silver light, not as warning, as recognition, that sometimes the only way forward is through. And the people brave enough to walk that path become something more than human and less than divine. They become honest. And in an empire built on lies, honesty was the most dangerous power of all.